Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook Library, a sanctuary of stories where fan fictions come alive, where ancient legends echo from the East and Western worlds awaken with wonder. Settle in. Your journey begins now.
The Shadow Monarch in the Marvel World Chapter 26. Now, Ashbourne had an arsenal of defensive, supportive, and attack-based skills, honed and perfected within his illusionary training. My lord, it's finished, Reed announced, handing Ashbourne his newly forged creation, an ore fused from both proto-adamantium and mysterium. To Ashbourne, months had passed in training, but to the outside world, only a few seconds had elapsed. Amazing, Ashbourne muttered, channeling his power into the ore. The moment his energy coursed through it, the output of his power increased by heights his current armor couldn't hope of matching. Without hesitation, he continued pouring his energy into the metal, refining it further. Hours passed, and under the immense infusion of his shadow energy, the once pure silver ore began to morph and transform, taking on an entirely new, never-before-seen form, a material that had never existed in any world before. Mission completed. Shadow Monarch's ore objective. Take proto-adamantium and mysterium and fuse them with the power of the Shadow Monarch to create Shadow Monarch's ore. Reward. Army Soldier's Armor Set, Shadow Monarch Gear Evolution. With that notification, all of Ashbourne's shadows underwent a transformation. Their forms shifted, clad in newly forged armor that significantly boosted their power. The same was true for Ashbourne himself. His silver armor shimmered for a moment before darkening, shifting into a sleek black and purple set, radiating an aura of pure dominance. The transformation was complete. His new gear embodied the essence of the Shadow Monarch. Such power! Ashbourne muttered, feeling the surge of raw strength coursing through his body. His new armor didn't just increase his power, it amplified it to heights so extreme that his body needed time to adjust. His stats had skyrocketed into the hundreds of billions, an astronomical leap that even he found staggering. He exhaled slowly, steadying himself as his body adapted to the sheer increase in strength. It wasn't just him, his shadows had evolved alongside him. Moments ago, they were 500 times stronger than when they were alive. Now, 500 million times stronger. The increase was insane. His new armor, combined with their enhanced gear, had pushed their capabilities to 50 million times their former strength. And with Ashbourne's newly gained mastery of darkness, courtesy of his training under Mega Mind's illusion, their abilities had multiplied tenfold. Let's go. Ashbourne's voice was calm, yet absolute. He threw a glance toward his shadows, his eyes gleaming beneath his helm. With this power, he knew he was still far from facing the likes of Asgard. Even with the stats of a billion, destroying a planet was still a challenge for Ashbourne. Deep in the void of space, amidst the silence of the cosmos, a group of powerhouses drifted forward. Spider-Man, Jean Grey, Iron Man, Ant-Man, Luke Cage, Hulk, Wolverine, Gladiator, Galactus, Firelord, Thanos, and Thor. They had scoured the universe, devouring everything in their path, but now, they all paused. Before them, a portal of swirling darkness split reality open, and through it, a figure emerged. Cloaked in living shadows, standing atop a colossal dragon, the presence was imposing, absolute, and unreadable. Ant-Man narrowed his eyes. Who are you? The figure did not hesitate. His voice was calm, yet carried a weight that bent the cosmos itself. I am Ashbourne, god of darkness. With those words, the void itself seemed to move, and from beneath him, a sea of shadows surged forward, forming an unstoppable wave of monstrous power. Yet, among them, only one shadow stepped forward, Energy Master, the fused entity of Vulcan, Alexander, and Gambit. A being of pure energy manipulation, crackling with power beyond mortal comprehension. You're in a weakened state, Reed said with a smirk, his gaze locked on the most dangerous person present, Jean Grey. She had yet to fully succumb to the Dark Phoenix, but it was only a matter of time. Galactus' power has been divided among you, which means the Galactus standing before us is nothing more than a starving husk, and the rest of you should be roughly at his level. The zombified heroes and titans were stunned. Reed. Iron Man's voice carried both shock and disbelief. It was impossible. Reed Richards had been among the first to fall. Yet, before any of them could react further, Megamind moved. A force of unparalleled mental might, he struck directly into Jean Grey's mind, challenging the Dark Phoenix head-on. The battle was instant, a war of wills fought in a realm beyond the physical. Jean had no choice. She had to divert all her focus to aiding the Dark Phoenix against Megamind. But even with cosmic power at her disposal, she was losing. A weakened Dark Phoenix was not enough to match the sheer mental force of Megamind. The tide of battle had shifted before it even began. Why was the Dark Phoenix weakened? How could something known by so many titles, the beginning and end of all creation, Alpha and Omega, the heart of all things, the sum and substance of all that lives, be losing? There was a pattern to these names. Life and death. The beginning and the end. A force that transcended all living things. Yet, here in this broken universe, where the concept of life and death no longer existed, the Phoenix Force had no foundation to draw upon. It was like a fire deprived of oxygen, flickering dimly in the void. With its power diminished, Megamind was able to completely suppress it, forcing Jean Grey into an unwinnable battle. But even if the Phoenix Force was not weakened thanks to the state of this universe, Megamind would have still won. That left Energy Master to face the rest of the zombified titans. Come. At first, it seemed as if Energy Master was simply challenging the zombies, beckoning them to attack. But within seconds, they all felt it. Their very energy was being drained from their bodies. Every ounce of cosmic power, kinetic force, and gamma energy they possessed ripped away as if obeying Energy Master's call. Realizing the danger, the zombies instinctively tried to move, but they couldn't. Even the kinetic energy needed to take a single step was gone, leaving them frozen in place. My lord, Energy Master said, kneeling as the stolen energy gathered into a concentrated mass before him. With a nod, Ashbourne reached out, absorbing it all into his shadow. Host has absorbed a large amount of gamma energy and power cosmic. Warning. This energy exceeds the host's current limits. 99% of the energy has been redirected to strengthen Shadow Monarch. The remaining 1% has been utilized to evolve the host. Host evolution. Initiated. The host has remained human for too long. To accommodate the power gained, evolution is necessary. New race. Half monarch, half human. Note. Due to reason, full monarch transformation is currently unavailable. Ashbourne stood still, feeling the changes unfold within him. His power surged, his stats multiplying many times over, but more than his own strength, his shadows had undergone an even greater transformation. He turned his gaze toward Franklin Richards, once a being whose very existence defied reality. Now, even as a shadow, Franklin was beginning to reclaim fragments of his full power. If Galactus had been at full power, Franklin would have regained 100% of his full strength. But that was a matter for another time. For now, Ashbourne turned his attention toward the Hulk. Make him angry, Ashbourne ordered, his voice calm yet commanding. Without hesitation, Megamind split his focus, reaching into the depths of Hulk's mind. He suppressed Banner entirely, allowing Hulk's rage to explode unchecked. The angrier Hulk became, the stronger he grew, and the more gamma energy he accumulated. Energy Master stepped forward, his expression serious. With a single motion, he siphoned every ounce of Hulk's energy, draining it away before the Hulk could unleash his full strength. The raw energy surged toward Ashbourne, who absorbed it all into his shadow. Shadow Monarch job class has grown stronger. Ashbourne's power continued to expand, the system refining and evolving his abilities with each new surge of energy. The stronger his shadows became, the closer he edged toward something beyond mortality. Warning, the host has caught the attention of a powerful being. The host should stop or risk the destruction of this universe. Chapter 27 Inches Stop. Ashbourne didn't hesitate for even a second upon seeing the notification. A cold sweat ran down his back. He had already drawn the Oblivion's attention, and now it seemed something even greater was watching. He didn't want to push his luck and ended up facing the shadow of the creator of the Marvel Universe itself. Kill them all. We don't have time to waste. Leave Jean Grey and Galactus in a half-dead state. His voice was steady, but his unease was clear. Energy Master wasted no time. With a simple gesture, he drained the zombies of their life force, leaving behind nothing but bones. Ashbourne stepped forward, using shadow extraction, bringing forth a new legion of shadows from the remains of the fallen. Spider-Man, Iron Man, Ant-Man, Luke Cage, and Wolverine were the only ones Ashbourne chose to resurrect as shadows. With a simple command, Shadow extraction was activated, and one by one, they rose once more, their forms now cloaked in darkness, kneeling silently before their new master. Ashbourne floated off the dragon, using ruler's authority to glide effortlessly toward Thor's lifeless body. He paused, eyes settling on Mjolnir, the legendary hammer resting beside its former wielder. For a moment, he simply stared at it before reaching out. Unlike the common misconception, one didn't need a pure heart to lift the hammer. Worthiness was not about morality. It was about power, about destruction, about the unyielding will to impose one's force upon the world. Ashbourne wrapped his fingers around Mjolnir's handle. To be worthy of the hammer is to break, to smash, to destroy, he muttered, gripping the weapon tightly. His voice was calm, yet it carried a weight that seemed to stir something deep within the ancient artifact. So tell me, hammer, will you join me in battle? For a moment, nothing happened. Then, Mjolnir shuddered in his grasp. A storm brewed above, dark clouds twisting unnaturally as crackling lightning illuminated the battlefield. I don't care for Thor's power, Ashbourne continued, his voice barely above a whisper, yet carried by the rising winds. I care for the god Tempest. The mother of all storms. The true force behind you. The hammer trembled violently now. Has it been fun? He asked, tilting his head. This rotten universe. Serving an owner who never even realized his true potential. A god who had to rely on you for the most basic of things. Mjolnir roared. The storm above exploded into chaos, lightning flashing wildly. You were once a storm greater than any galaxy known to man, Ashbourne continued, his voice unwavering as he gripped Mjolnir. So powerful that Odin himself had to seal you away. But look around you, this universe is dying. Soon, it will be devoid of all life, leaving you to rage in solitude. The hammer trembled violently in his grasp, bolts of electricity arcing off its surface, crackling with unrestrained fury. But that's a sad fate, isn't it? Ashbourne mused, his golden eyes locked onto the hammer. So why don't you follow me instead? With me, you'll never be caged again. As if in response, the comic storm clouds above erupted, a bolt of pure, divine lightning tearing through the sky and striking them both. The world shook. Susan gasped, instinctively raising her hands to form a force field around Ashbourne, but before she could act, Mega Mind raised a hand. Don't worry, he said calmly, watching the unfolding event. His voice carried certainty, even as the storm raged around them. This wasn't a rejection. It was a baptism. Sensing the host has picked up Mjolnir, unlocking both the power of Thor and the mother storm trapped within it. Detecting a new Uru. Absorbing the runes inscribed on the hammer. Transmuting their enchantments into raw fuel for the host's power. Conversion complete. Congratulations, the host's power has reached its peak. The only path for the Shadow Monarch's strength to grow further is through increased mastery of umbrakinesis. The Mother Storm has been fully absorbed into the newly evolved Shadow Monarch's ore, now reforged with Uru. As a result, the host's armor has undergone an unprecedented transformation, granting an exponential increase in power. As the system's notification faded, Ashbourne exhaled slowly, feeling the raw, crackling power coursing through him. The very fabric of reality seemed to ripple under the pressure of his mere presence. His newly forged armor no longer just emanated darkness, it now howled with an eternal storm, flickering between pure shadow and divine lightning. Mjolnir, once an artifact that decided the worth of its wielder, now was fused with his Shadow Monarch gear, strengthening not only him but both the Primordial Storm, and his shadow soldiers to greater heights. The stronger I get, the stronger my shadow soldiers become, but at this rate, I'll never surpass my heavy hitters, Ashbourne thought, comparing his own strength to that of his most formidable shadows. Arise. His voice echoed through the void of space, a command that sent ripples across reality itself. Black lightning crackled violently, shooting from his body in chaotic arcs. The moment the energy surged forth, it struck the remains of the fallen zombies, Thor, Thanos, Gladiator, Firelord. Space itself twisted under the weight of the summoning. A massive shadow tornado erupted into the abyss, devouring the corpses in a swirling vortex of pure darkness. The pull of its energy was so immense that it bent the very fabric of space-time, distorting the surrounding area like a collapsing star. Then, in the midst of the storm, 4 towering figures emerged. Gladiator, his form wreathed in shadow, eyes blazing with unwavering supremacy. Firelord, his cosmic flames now a black inferno, seething with unnatural power. Thanos, exuding an even greater aura of inevitability, his very existence a paradox of death and rebirth. And finally, Thor, the god of thunder, his new form now infused with the very storm Ashbourne had claimed. They stepped forward in unison, their power crackling through the void, before falling to one knee. Let's go to Asgard, Ashbourne commanded as his shadow shifted, forming a swirling portal. Without hesitation, he stepped through, emerging onto the golden realm of the gods. The moment he arrived, Odin was already there, waiting. Ashbourne expected this. The moment he absorbed the runes from Mjolnir, Odin would have sensed the shift. The All-Father stood tall, his one remaining eye burning with divine fury. He wasn't alone. Behind him, a sea of zombified Asgardians stretched across the horizon. Warriors, gods, and legends, all twisted into grotesque mockeries of their former selves. Ashbourne barely spared them a glance. His attention was on Odin. Franklin, he said, a faint smirk on his lips. Let's see how much damage 1% of your power can do. At those words, Franklin shot forward, an unstoppable force against the decaying might of zombie Odin, a clash of cosmic power against divine wrath. Charge! Heimdall's voice roared through the battlefield, and the undead forces of Asgard surged forward. Ashbourne exhaled, then raised his hand, and brought it down. In an instant, the ground trembled as a shadow tsunami exploded forth, billions of shadow soldiers materializing at his command. The battlefield drowned in darkness as Asgard's forces were met with an overwhelming flood of shadows. Chapter 28 Ashbourne exhaled, then raised his hand, and brought it down. In an instant, the ground trembled as a shadow tsunami exploded forth, billions of shadow soldiers materializing at his command. The battlefield drowned in darkness as Asgard's forces were met with an overwhelming flood of shadows. Boom! The very fabric of reality trembled as Odin and Franklin clashed, shaking the nine realms to their core. The shockwaves of their battle tore through space, sending ripples across the multiverse itself. He's stronger, Thor whispered, eyes wide in disbelief. I expected as much, Ashbourne replied, watching the battlefield unfold. A zombified Odin who doesn't need to sleep, that means an Odin operating at 100% at all times. Although it kind of make no sense since the Odin sleep is needed to replenish his powers, Odin, wielding the full might of the Odin force, was an unstoppable force. But Franklin, even in a weakened state, was no mere opponent. His unmatched reality warping abilities allowed him to stand on equal ground with the All-Father. Their battle was beyond anything the Nine Realms had ever witnessed. Every collision sent violent shockwaves across the cosmos, distorting space, shattering dimensions, and shaking even the most ancient planes of existence. Odin was anything but weak. This was a being who stood just short of the likes of Galactus. They're evenly matched, Ashbourne observed with a grin, watching Franklin and Odin clash as equals. He couldn't help but wonder, just how powerful was a fully grown Franklin Richards. Even now, with only 1% of his true strength, Franklin was only 1% the strength of a Celestial's. Yet he was holding his own against Odin at full power. Ashbourne moved. In an instant, he vanished from sight and sense. His presence erased so thoroughly that not even the All-Father noticed. Only Heimdall, gifted with his unparalleled sight, sensed the danger. All-Father, behind you! Heimdall roared. Odin barely turned in time. Just as Ashbourne's blade cut through his divine magic and into his skull. There was no resistance. Not even the might of the Odin force could stand against Ashbourne's weapon. His gear was too powerful. I feared he might self-destruct or something, Ashbourne muttered, stabbing his palm into Odin's chest as he began to absorb the Odin force. Golden energy burst from Odin's body, flowing into Ashbourne's veins. His eyes flared with divine power, but within seconds, the glow darkened, shadows coiling off them like steam. Gained a new energy, born from the fusion of multiple divinities, creating a force beyond any single god. This energy has been converted into a form that best suits the host. Umbrakinesis has evolved into Shadow Monarch force as the power settled within him. Ashbourne could feel it. Raw, limitless potential. He no longer needed ruler's authority to fly. Strength surged through him, his entire being elevated by the fusion of darkness and divinity. Though still weaker than Odin at his peak, Ashbourne now stood as a true powerhouse in his own right. The host has reached the peak of his physical capability. Further growth is now only possible through the mastery of his abilities, the evolution of his power, and the expansion of his shadow army. While temporary power boosts can be obtained, this is the host's baseline strength. Ashbourne exhaled sharply, irritation flickering across his face. So I can't just steal energy to grow stronger anymore. What a pain. Shaking his head, he turned his focus back to the battlefield. With a single motion of his hand, a surge of his newfound power ripped through Asgard, obliterating every remaining zombie in an instant. Arise! Ashbourne's voice echoed through Asgard, and for a moment, time itself seemed to freeze. Then, a wave of darkness erupted from Odin's fallen form, engulfing the battlefield. The shadows churned and twisted, and when they finally settled, a towering figure stood amidst the black mist. A newborn shadow, clad in regal armor, let out a roar so powerful it rippled across the entire multiverse. Without sigh, Ashbourne patted Odin's shoulders before he landed on the ground, before walking forward, his steps steady as he made his way toward Odin's throne room. Go. Slaughter every zombie in your path and turn them into shadows. Ashbourne's voice was calm but carried an undeniable command. Find Loki as soon as possible and turn him into a shadow. Odin, Franklin, search the 9 realms and convert every zombie you encounter. Without hesitation, the shadows dispersed, their figures vanishing into the darkness, spreading across the realms like an unstoppable tide. Ashbourne exhaled, crossing his arms as he gazed toward the horizon. There was nothing more to do now but expand his army, and wait for Gore. Elsewhere in the 9 realms, on a distant, forsaken planet drenched in darkness, Gore the God Butcher convulsed violently, his screams muffled against the dead soil. The all-black Necrosword pulsed with raw, unfathomable energy, black tendrils slithering over his skin, digging into his flesh, reshaping his very being at a genetic level. I gift you my power. In return, bring me the new god. Ashbourne Blackheart. The voice echoed within the zombified Gore's mind, a sound so vast and deep it crushed all other thoughts. Gore's body seized violently. A scream tore from his throat, raw and unrelenting, as something ancient and unnatural slithered through his veins. I hold the genetic codes of billions across the multiverse, the voice resonated, every syllable warping Gore's very essence. I shall reshape you into the ultimate lifeform. Something even gods and celestials fear. Gore's screams intensified. His body tore itself apart, flesh twisting, bones snapping, muscles unraveling, only to reform, stronger, more perfect than before. Long, jagged wings burst from his back, blacker than the void itself. His muscles coiled with newfound strength, his senses sharpened beyond mortal comprehension. With a single careless movement, the sheer force of his presence shook the planet's core, nearly pushing it to the brink of destruction. Chapter 29 Mission complete. Conquer Asgard objective. Go to Asgard, slaughter all zombies, and claim Asgard as your own. Note: Asgard exists in a different dimension. Reward: Shadow Monarch gains a new ability punishment. Devoured by the void time limit. 1/3 days. Shadow extraction has evolved. Shadow extraction can now be used on spiritual beings, allowing the Shadow Monarch to raise and command entities beyond the physical realm. Oh, I didn't think the day would come. Ashbourne thought, staring at the notification. This was exactly why he hadn't attempted to raise Galactus or the Phoenix Force before. Both were spiritual entities, immune to shadow extraction. But now, that limitation no longer applies. Sitting on his throne, Ashbourne took a moment to consider his next move. Then, without hesitation, he raised a hand and opened a portal, stepping through to where the half-dead bodies of Jean Grey and Galactus lay. Holding out his palm, he watched as the weakened Dark Phoenix, once a force of destruction feared across the cosmos, was pulled towards him, its fiery essence twisting and writhing in resistance before finally succumbing to his call. I thought about turning you into a shadow, Ashbourne said, his voice steady, but in the end, I've decided not to. You're free to do as you wish. With a flick of his wrist, Shadow Monarch force surged through him, wrapping around the Phoenix Force like tendrils of liquid night. He willed it forward, not to bind, but to cleanse. The corruption that had tainted the cosmic entity began to unravel, drawn into the abyss of his power. A brilliant explosion followed. The Phoenix flared outward, wings spreading wide as it ascended into the sky, its form rapidly expanding until it rivaled the size of a moon. Golden flames turned pure once more, swirling with unrestrained power as they gazed down at Ashbourne. Something isn't right about you. The Phoenix Force's voice echoed softly, laced with something between curiosity and wariness. Ashbourne simply smiled, the shadows around him flickering in response. Nah, I just have a high affinity with the concept of darkness. The name's Ashbourne. Should I call you Phoenix? He asked, removing his helmet to meet the Phoenix Force eye to eye. For a moment, Ashbourne thought he saw the Phoenix shake, but he wasn't sure. The cosmic entity hovered, its flames flickering with curiosity. What do you plan on doing? With your power, there's almost nothing you can't do. This universe alone can't contain someone of your potential. Ashbourne shrugged. Honestly, I don't know. I'm thinking of heading to another universe and figuring things out when I get there. I already lived the power-hungry dream, and I'm sick of it. He let out a tired sigh. Days of grinding, barely any sleep, constantly watching my back so I don't get eaten by some mutant zombie, not exactly fun. His gaze shifted to Jean Grey, then to Galactus. Arise, he commanded. Darkness swirled around their broken bodies, creeping into every crack and crevice. And then, boom, the universe trembled, far more violently than when Odin had been turned into a shadow. This wasn't just due to Galactus's overwhelming strength, it was the sheer cosmic weight of his rebirth, the ripple effect threatening to shake existence itself. But Ashbourne contained it, keeping the aftershocks locked within this realm. The Phoenix Force gazed at the massive pillar of darkness, watching as it slowly faded, revealing a newly reborn Galactus. But this wasn't the same cosmic devourer as before. This Galactus was far, far stronger than in life. Shock flickered in the Phoenix Force's burning eyes. It turned toward Jean Grey, now a shadow as well, and felt a shift. Her presence, her power, she was the perfect host. More than ever before. So, what are you? Are you like Odin's Odin Force? Ashbourne asked while flying onto Galactus's palm, signaling the Phoenix Force to follow. Although he knew a lot of the Phoenix Force, he had reasons not to show he had such knowledge. No, I'm the manifestation of the prime universal force of life. I'm also the nexus of all psionic energy which does, has, and ever will exist in all realities of the universe. The Phoenix Force said, its flames flickering as it regarded Ashbourne with unease, realizing it had underestimated him. So you have some grand role in creation or something? Ashbourne asked, tilting his head. Just how were you even born? I was born of the void between states of being. I am the spark that ignites creation and the flame that consumes it, the Phoenix Force said, studying Ashbourne carefully. Really? But isn't there someone who is the manifestation of death? Are you two best friends or enemies? And if you consume the flame of creation, doesn't that make you death? Or is death only responsible for physical death and nothing more, like the end of individual lives? Ashbourne asked, his curiosity genuine. The Phoenix Force hesitated, its flames flickering as if the question itself had never been fully considered. Death's domain is the process of the living losing life, it finally answered. My domain is the process of creation dying. We have no relationship. Ashbourne nodded, processing the answer. So, you don't deal with individuals. You deal with the death of creation itself, the end of cycles, the collapse of everything. He let out a low chuckle. That makes you way scarier than death. So, what do you plan on doing? Since I'm going to turn every zombie in the universe into a shadow, I doubt you'll be able to find a host for a long time, Ashbourne said lightly. The cosmic entity turned its gaze toward Earth. Why did you let the humans go? Many of them possessed unique abilities that could have benefited you. Ashbourne rolled his eyes. I could also devour my shadows to grow stronger, but I refuse. I guess I'm too soft, but I don't mind it. He exhaled, looking ahead. I see my shadows as more than mere tools, they're my allies. As for the humans on Earth, I don't know. I can't find the right words, but it just didn't feel right to attack those who had no ill will towards me. He stepped forward, nearing the edge of Galactus's massive palm as they arrived in Asgard, the realm now under his rule. I see. You allow those weak human emotions to control you, the Phoenix Force said, its tone laced with curiosity. Ashbourne rolled his eyes. You've existed for eons. I highly doubt you've never once experienced those same weak emotions, he replied, watching as the Phoenix Force hesitated for a brief moment. Noticing this, a smirk tugged at his lips. Emotions came and went, it finally said. To me, they were like a blink, fleeting, insignificant. But to you, they could be a major ripple in your existence, something that lingers, something that could lead to your downfall. I'm not one to regret my actions, so how about you join my army? Honestly, I have no idea who I'd even need my army for, but strengthening it wouldn't hurt, right? I won't turn you into a shadow. Not out of pity or some human sentiment, but because my gut tells me you're different. And so far, my gut's never been wrong. Ashbourne stopped walking, turning to look directly at the Phoenix Force. What else has your gut told you? It asked. Ashbourne thought for a moment before responding. When I was absorbing Hulk's energy, I got this bad feeling. And for some time now, I've had this sense that something big is coming after me. My instincts have never failed me, Ashbourne said with a smile. The Phoenix Force narrowed its eyes as it studied him. I will stay. Under one condition. You will do nothing to disrupt the balance of creation, and will protect it, it said firmly. Do I look like someone who causes chaos for no reason? Ashbourne asked, crossing his arms. The Phoenix Force eyed him carefully, scanning him from head to toe. Ashbourne followed her gaze, then glanced down at himself, his dark armor radiating an ominous energy. He let out an awkward cough. Well, I control the darkness. The darkness doesn't control me, he clarified with a shrug. You can check my mind if you want. I have no interest in some grand plan to end the world or whatever. He said with a roll of his eyes. I can see that. The fact that you bathe in shadows, yet your soul remains untouched by them, makes no sense. The fact that your mind isn't consumed by darkness, and it doesn't affect your power, also makes no sense, the Phoenix Force said, scrutinizing him. Ashbourne gave her a strange look. Not everyone is as mentally weak as you, he said bluntly. There is no dark Ashbourne. There's just me. The Phoenix Force flinched slightly, clearly taken aback by his words. To let mere mortals corrupt you, Ashbourne said with a hint of disdain. I suppose it's for the best that you stay by my side. Maybe I can teach you a thing or two. The Phoenix Force gritted its teeth in anger but quickly froze when Galactus narrowed his eyes at it. In her current weakened state, it was no match for him. So, it could do nothing more than hold back its displeasure and follow Ashbourne. Chapter 30 Feet. Who was he? I thought, staring at the man cloaked in darkness. It was strange. As a being with a unique connection to both life and death, I understood his essence. When he appeared before my host, I felt something dark, something more primordial, more absolute. His authority and potential didn't just touch upon death. They resonated with something far greater, something beyond death itself. It reached into oblivion. What was oblivion? The void. The end of all things. Nothingness incarnate. Among the cosmic abstracts, oblivion was considered the third strongest, second only to its direct counterpart. But under the right conditions, when creation teetered too far into its grasp, oblivion was unrivaled. It was then that it became the strongest force of all. Was Jean Grey a good host? Yes, she was perfect, perhaps the best host I had ever bonded with. But this man shrouded in shadows, he was something else entirely. He went beyond perfection. The destruction we could unleash together, the power we could wield, it was beyond anything else I could hope for. But I didn't even have time to dwell on the thought. A shadow, its head unnaturally large, appeared within Jean's mental world and launched a relentless assault against me. A battle of mental wills erupted, and to my surprise, I found myself overwhelmed. It wasn't just the raw power behind its attacks but the presence I felt within the shadow itself. A familiar presence. Charles. The same mortal who had once suppressed me deep within Jean's mind. The same human who had fought me to a standstill, until Jean had stepped in and tipped the scales. And now, even in death, he had returned, stronger than ever. This time, even with Jean Grey and I working together, we were utterly powerless against this fused being. No matter how hard we fought, we were helpless. What made it worse was that this shadow wasn't even focused entirely on us. It had the audacity to split its attention elsewhere, effortlessly multitasking while crushing us under its overwhelming might. In the end, I had no choice but to retreat, forced into dormancy within Jean Grey's half-dead body, watching in silent fury as the being who commanded these shadows stood victorious. But that fury quickly turned to shock. When the one called Ashbourne commanded the shadows to rise, the former zombies obeyed, but they didn't just rise. They stood, far stronger than they had ever been in life. Of course, in my eyes, they were still weak, mere ants compared to the greater forces of the universe. But that wasn't what disturbed me. It was something far more unnatural. These shadows, they weren't just mindless puppets or hollow echoes of what they once were. No, they were nearly identical to their former selves, only enhanced in every way. Their durability, their strength, their minds, it was as if they had been reborn, reforged into something superior. And that was terrifying. He didn't stop there. No, he moved on to Thor, the god I once saw as my son. Although, to a being of my stature, such attachments meant little. I held no motherly affection for Thor, yet I still watched over him in my own way. But what truly shook me was what happened next. I watched as he claimed the Mother Storm for himself, something I had never imagined possible. The very storm that Odin had sealed away, the raw, untamed force of destruction, it became his. As if that wasn't enough, the hammer itself fused with him, along with the runes that granted Thor his power. Like the void itself, he devoured everything, growing ever stronger. And for the first time in my existence, I felt something unfamiliar. A creeping, gnawing unease. And yet, it still didn't stop there. Gladiator, Thor, Firelord, and most shockingly, Thanos, each one rose from death as his shadow. Thanos. A being who stood just below the likes of Odin and the other gods of his tier. And on that tier, Odin stood at the peak. Thanos was no mere powerhouse. He was a force to be reckoned with, a warlord who had challenged cosmic entities and lived to tell the tale. For him to return, not just as a shadow, but far stronger than when he was alive, was terrifying. This new Thanos wouldn't struggle against Galactus. No, he would stand against him as an equal, perhaps even emerge victorious. But again, it didn't stop there. Ashbourne set his sights on Asgard, and to my horror, I realized the truth. Even the weakest of his shadows was thousands of times stronger than the average Asgardian. It was a massacre, a slaughter so absolute that even the proudest warriors fell with ease. Even the rabbits were tearing through the fallen Asgardians as if they were nothing. It was a bloodbath. But it didn't stop there. Franklin Richards clashed with Odin, and I thought this battle might draw the attention of someone who would intervene before the multiverse suffered any lasting damage. Yet, I quickly realized no such intervention would come, because it wasn't needed. Ashbourne killed Odin. Not only that, but he stole the Odin force, growing even stronger. If only it had ended there. But after ordering his shadows to spread across the universe, slaughtering every last zombie, he returned to the throne room, only to then come back to us. And then, to my horror, he reached out, and I floated helplessly into his palm. I was scared. I didn't want to be turned into a shadow. I thought about turning you into a shadow, but in the end, I've decided not to. You're free to do as you wish. Ashbourne said, drawing out the corruption that had overtaken me. I didn't hesitate. I burst from his grasp, my form expanding as I quickly reclaimed my power. Though still weakened by the state of this universe, I was whole once more. Then, I turned to look at him, and what I saw left me stunned. His soul remained untouched. It wasn't overwhelmingly pure, like some noble-hearted hero, but it wasn't tainted either. It was balanced, neutral, in a way few beings ever were. To absorb my corruption and remain unchanged, to wield such deep darkness without it consuming him. Who was this man? Something isn't right about you. The words escaped me before I could stop them. This man, he defied reason. But more than that, I felt an inexplicable pull toward him. It wasn't just his power or his presence, it was something deeper. Without realizing it, I had been tracking his every movement, analyzing every action, every word. There was a weight to him, an aura that made everything he did seem more significant, more absolute. Nah, I just have a high affinity with the concept of darkness. He dismissed it with a casual shrug before meeting my gaze. The name's Ashbourne. Should I call you Phoenix? Then, he removed his helmet. And I froze. Through all that darkness, beneath the overwhelming power that cloaked him, lay a face so striking that, for the first time in my existence, I felt as though my non-existent heart had skipped a beat. He was beautiful. For a moment, I was completely stunned, unable to look away. It was as if the very concept of beauty had been redefined before my eyes. And before I even realized it, words began slipping from my lips. Questions, probing, searching, trying to understand the man beneath the darkness. For the first time in a long, long time, my non-existent heartbeat for someone. Chapter 31 Status Screen Name. Ashburn Blackheart Race. Human, Monarch Age. 13 days and 24 hours old level. 100 titles. Undead Slayer. Impossible Killer. Touch the Void. Weak Point Attacker. Triumphant over Adversity Stats HP. Infinite MP. Infinite HP Region. Infinite MP Region. Infinite. 80 Tributes Power. Infinite 100 times weaker off Earth speed. Infinite 100 times weaker off Earth durability. Infinite 100 times weaker off Earth intelligence. Infinite 100 times weaker off Earth charm. Infinite 100 times weaker off Earth. Class and skills. Job class. Shadow Monarch skills. Shadow Monarch force. Shadow inventory. Unwilling. Shadow weapon overlord. Detoxification. Tenacity. Longevity. Shadow mood. Shadow enhancement. +99 self-created skills. Job-specific skills. Shadow extraction. Shadow preservation V3. Shadow exchange. Monarch's domain. Shadow fusing V2 feat system. My stats make no sense. If I have infinite power, shouldn't I just be able to snap existence out? Ashbourne thought, frowning slightly as he examined his stats. Host, there are greater sets of infinity. It's difficult to explain in simple terms, so the system did not specify which level of infinity you possess. However, to provide a comparison, you are physically weaker than Thor, who was able to push and overpower the World Engine, a machine embedded into Yggdrasil that harnessed the full might of the World Tree. Ashbourne sighed, fully grasping the significance of Yggdrasil. He still remembered watching Loki, where the trickster god reformed Yggdrasil to hold together every timeline. But in the comics, Yggdrasil went even deeper than that. It wasn't just a tree, it was the very foundation connecting every timeline, reality, dimension, universe, and multiverse. Yggdrasil could be considered the veins of eternity's body. And eternity. It was the sentient embodiment of the universe itself. However, each individual eternity was merely a fragment, a single cell within the greater multiversal eternity. That was the true eternity, the one that encompassed the multiverse. How much power would it take to destroy a dimension? Infinite power. Right. But what about 2 dimensions? 3, 4. What about an infinite number of dimensions layered upon infinite realities? And beyond that, the entirety of the universe itself. Physically, Ashbourne wasn't as strong as Thor. But when drawing upon the Shadow Monarch force, he surpassed Thor yet still fell below Odin. That, however, could change. The Shadow Monarch force was the key. If he could push his mastery of it further, and refine it beyond its current limits, then one day, he could rise to a level surpassing even the top strongest beings in this world. In just 2 days, Ashbourne's shadows flooded the entire universe. From the depths of hell to every hidden dimension, every last zombie was claimed, rising again as part of his ever-growing legion. Zeus, Thor, and Storm were fused into a single entity, Thunder. The human phoenix merged with Searcher, giving rise to Blaze. Reed Richards, Tony Stark, the leader, and Peter Parker combined, birthing a new being, the Doctor. Doctor Strange, Scarlet Witch, and Doom fused, forming the unparalleled Mage. And Susan, she fused with 4 of the strongest Celestials, yet under Ashbourne's will, she retained her form. She remained Susan. My lord, I have come to report, I've discovered more life in the universe. Thunder appeared in the throne room in a flash of lightning, kneeling before Ashbourne, who was engrossed in the tablet before him. The Doctor had designed it to help him track all his shadows, making it easier to strategize who should be fused next. Who? Ashbourne asked, his brow furrowing as he noticed the unease in Thunder's expression. Hades, Bast, Amatsu Mikabashi, Seth, and many other gods of death. Thunder's voice was grave. You need to see this for yourself. Ashbourne's frown deepened. Without another word, he placed the tablet aside and followed Thunder. In an instant, they vanished in a flash of lightning, reappearing inside what seemed to be a mystical laboratory. In the center of the lab, trapped within a shimmering barrier, were the gods of death. Hades, Bast, Amatsu Mikabashi, Seth, and many others stood frozen, their divine forms restrained by an unknown force. Ashbourne glanced around, studying the strange laboratory. He searched his memory, trying to recall if he had ever seen this place before in a comic, but nothing came to mind. Reverse. With a simple command, Ashbourne activated his Shadow Monarch force. The fabric of time and space bent to his will, pausing before rewinding like a recording. The laboratory remained untouched, but its past unfolded before him in ghostly images, revealing the events that had transpired. As time unraveled, the truth emerged, the identity of the one responsible for this. This Thanos isn't from our universe, Thunder said, his voice filled with a shock that only deepened when the image of Sentry appeared, except this Sentry was a zombie. So, Thanos used Sentry to spread the virus? Thunder questioned, his disbelief evident. Ashbourne's gaze remained locked on the ghostly scene before him, his mind piecing together the puzzle. Even beings without physical forms were infected. The only way that makes sense is if the virus is connected to the void. Was the Thanos he was looking at from the main 616 universe? Boom. With just a thought, Ashbourne freed the gods of death. He barely spared them a glance, his focus locked onto Hela. If she was anything like her 616 counterpart, then she had once been a living Infinity Stone, a fact that intrigued him. Was she the same in this universe? Pushing that thought aside for the moment, Ashbourne turned his attention back to the larger issue at hand. Have you still not found Molecule Man? He asked, his voice calm but firm. With Gore arriving tomorrow, he needed to tie up every loose end. Sentry's mystery had been solved, but the bomb hidden in every universe, Molecule Man, was still unaccounted for. I looked into the past to find him, but at some point, he just disappeared, Allsight reported, his tone troubled. Allsight was still in Asgard, he didn't need to be near Ashbourne for them to speak normally to each other. Ashbourne frowned at the news. Allsight wasn't just any ordinary shadow, he was a fusion of Heimdall, Uatu, Miles Morales, Agamotto, and Sage. A being capable of seeing everything across time and space, past, present, and future, all at once. If even he couldn't track Molecule Man, then something was very wrong. What do you mean? Ashbourne asked with a deep frown. Something, or someone, didn't want him to be found, Allsight replied, his tone dark. Before he disappeared, my vision was cut off, completely blocked. I couldn't even perceive the moment he was taken. It's as if something erased his existence while keeping me from ever seeing how. Ashbourne's frown deepened. That was bad. Very bad. If someone could block Allsight, a fusion of some of the greatest cosmic observers, then they weren't dealing with a simple threat. Someone was actively working to keep them blind. Forget it, Ashbourne said after a moment. Do you at least know where Gore is? Allsight hesitated before shaking his head. No. The same goes for Null. Those two are completely hidden from my sight. Chapter 32. My Lord. I see him. The one known as Gore. Allsight's voice was heavy, his usual composure shaken as he stood beside Ashbourne, who gazed silently into the vastness of the universe, awaiting the inevitable. The moment Allsight's words fell, the universe itself trembled. Space distorted, reality wavered, an ominous force spread across existence, the sheer presence of its darkness threatening to unravel everything. Ashbourne's expression hardened as he sensed the overwhelming surge of power. A darkness so vast and consuming that it seemed to stretch beyond the edges of creation itself. He's coming. The Phoenix Force, without hesitation, erupted into full power, fusing with Shadow Megamind. The very instant their fusion was complete, before even a heartbeat could pass, Gore was there. He had crossed an infinite distance, a span of existence so great it defied measurement. He had traversed realms, dimensions, and space itself as if they were mere illusions, arriving in Asgard with a force that threatened to tear reality apart. Boom. The universe trembled as Galactus and Gore clashed, the impact so immense it sent ripples through reality itself, cracking the very fabric of existence. The sheer force of their battle distorted space, creating shockwaves that traveled across dimensions. Gore moved like a blur, his speed beyond comprehension. Before Galactus could even react, a devastating kick struck his stomach, bending the devourer of worlds in half. The impact was catastrophic. Galactus was launched across the universe, his massive form finding itself at the edge of the universe. So fast. Ashbourne's eyes widened in shock. Even with the armor he had forged, armor that was, For all intents and purposes, indestructible, Gore had torn through it as if it were nothing. Every one of Ashbourne's shadows was clad in that same armor, each of them stronger than they had ever been in life. And yet, against Gore, even Galactus had been overwhelmed in an instant. He's healing too slowly, Ashbourne noted, sensing Galactus's sluggish regeneration. But there was no time to dwell on that. Without hesitation, he commanded his shadows to engage, sending his army surging toward Gore. The God Butcher responded with a monstrous shriek, his cry summoning twisted creatures from the abyss. Shadows of horrors beyond comprehension crawled from the void, clashing violently against Ashbourne's forces. The battlefield was a chaos of darkness, a war of nightmares incarnate. Mega Mind, is it? Ashbourne reached out through their shared mental link, forming a plan. Above the carnage, his gaze locked with Gore's. The God Butcher remained still for a moment, watching as their armies clashed in an evenly matched struggle. Though Ashbourne's shadows held the advantage in numbers and experience, Gore countered by continuously creating stronger and stronger monsters, pushing his abyss to its limits. But even he had to recognize the inefficiency of this approach. The energy required to sustain such creatures would drain him faster than he could afford. Realizing this, Gore stopped. His abyssal creations continued their attack, but he no longer poured his strength into summoning more. Instead, he turned his focus on Warper. He could feel his power. Boom. Gore barely managed to cross his arms in time, blocking Ashbourne's scythe as it came dangerously close to slicing him apart. Ashbourne had teleported, closing the distance in an instant, and at the same time, he had fused with his shadow, amplifying his strength, speed, and overall capabilities to terrifying heights. Weak. Gore roared, his voice carrying a primal fury. Without hesitation, he lashed out, his palm striking toward Ashbourne at blinding speed, aiming to end him in a single, decisive blow. Full counter. Ashbourne met Gore's attack head-on, his reflexes barely keeping up thanks to Mega Mind enhancing his thought speed countless times over. Boom. Gore was sent rocketing away, his own devastating attack rebounding against him. He flipped mid-air, trying to regain control before landing. But before he could, Warper appeared above him in a blur, driving his fist into Gore's stomach with enough force to distort space itself. But at the last second, Gore's body twisted, exploding into writhing darkness. From within, a spear of pure abyss shot out toward Warper, its jagged edges crackling with destructive energy. Full counter. In an instant, Ashbourne switched places with Warper, intercepting the attack and sending it right back at Gore. Boom. Gore coughed up a mouthful of blood, his body hurtling toward the ground, crashing into Asgard with an impact that sent shockwaves across the realm. But before the dust could settle, he burst out of the crater, rocketing toward Ashbourne, his eyes burning with pure hatred. Ashbourne gritted his teeth, his muscles screaming in protest. Keeping up with Gore's sheer speed was pushing his body far beyond its natural limits. Every reaction, every movement demanded more than what should have been possible. But Ashbourne wasn't about to back down. Using limitation suppression, he forced his body to ignore its natural restraints, pushing himself past the threshold of impossibility. Go. Ashbourne's voice rang out as Gore's full attention locked onto him. In a flash of lightning, Thunder moved in, his hammer crackling with power as he swung with all his might. Boom. Gore reacted instantly, turning just in time to block the incoming hammer. But just as he raised his defenses, Warper appeared behind him, his knee aimed straight for Gore's spine. Yet, at the very last second, just before impact, Gore vanished. In an instant, he switched places with Thunder. Thunder, now caught in Warper's devastating strike, was sent rocketing away at speeds so absurd that reality itself shattered in his wake, distorting space and time as he disappeared into the void. Gore wasted no time. The moment Thunder was out of sight, he lunged at Warper. But Warper reacted just as swiftly, warping reality to replay past events, shifting the battlefield itself to his advantage. Even though Gore seemed immune to his powers, Warper had no need to affect him directly, he twisted everything around him. The very fabric of existence bent to his will, reshaping the fight as the battle escalated beyond mortal comprehension. So, he acted. While Gore was momentarily caught off guard, Galactus appeared, along with Thunder, as they were never hit or sent flying. The three of them surrounded Gore, closing in on him from all sides. Chapter 33. So, he acted. While Gore was momentarily caught off guard, Galactus appeared, along with Thunder, as they were never hit or sent flying. The three of them surrounded Gore, closing in on him from all sides. At the same time, Mage unleashed the full force of light, hope, and justice, forging that power into a blinding sword of pure energy. The sword rocketed toward Gore, tearing through space at speeds beyond comprehension. A massive explosion erupted where Gore stood. The sheer force of the blast sent shockwaves rippling across Asgard, warping the sky itself. Galactus, Thunder, and Warper didn't hesitate. The instant the attack landed, they moved in, striking from every angle, aiming to overwhelm Gore before he could react. But before their attacks could land, a dark, symbiotic mass burst outward, forming a barrier around Gore. The living mass pulsed with unnatural energy, swatting all three of them away like insects. From within the barrier, Gore shot out, his massive wings unfurling as he took to the air. His predatory gaze locked onto Ashbourne, his entire body radiating raw, unrelenting malice. "Bring it, ugly," Ashbourne taunted, standing his ground. With a single flap of his wings, Gore vanished, reappearing before Ashbourne in an instant. But just as they were about to clash, he teleported. In the blink of an eye, Gore materialized behind Ashbourne, his blade plunging forward. Boom! A cataclysmic impact rippled through reality itself, tearing through the very fabric of the multiverse. But before the attack could land on Ashbourne, Warper had intervened. At the last possible moment, Warper warped reality itself, switching places with Ashbourne, taking the full brunt of Gore's attack. The collision of Gore's devastating power and Warper's reality warping abilities sent shockwaves across the battlefield, space itself fracturing under the sheer force of their clash. Gore narrowed his eyes, irritated. He hadn't expected Warper to hold his own. No, Warper wasn't just enduring the attack. He was adapting to his own power, and bit by bit, he was drawing out the full limits of his capability. Warper lacked full mastery over his abilities, but in a battle of this scale, where he was pushed to his absolute limits, he was rapidly awakening his true potential. Every clash, every counter, every surge of power forced him to evolve at an accelerating rate. But he wasn't the only one. Even Thunder was growing stronger, though not at the same exponential rate as Warper. Still, the battle was sharpening them both, pushing them beyond their previous limits. "No more reality," Gore roared, his voice booming across existence itself. His eyes locked onto Warper, filled with pure hatred for the one constantly twisting and rewriting reality around him. Warper merely smirked, but his expression quickly hardened. Cracks. They spread across the battlefield, fractures in space itself. The universe trembled, the very fabric of reality straining under the relentless clash of titanic forces. And then, like glass, the universe shattered. Warper found himself without a reality to warp, rendered no different from a normal human. His pupils shrank as he realized he was completely helpless. Boom! A barrier formed around Warper at the last second, shielding him from Gore's attack. Gore's eyes locked onto Susan, who struggled to maintain the barrier under the immense pressure of his strike. But before Gore could move to finish her off, his head snapped toward Ashbourne. Ashbourne was moving, not toward him, but toward the multiverse. Yes, they were no longer inside it. They had been thrown outside, beyond the multiverse. It was called outside because it was outside the multiverse. Marvel wasn't too good at naming stuff. Even while ignoring the different dimensions that make up each reality, there are many layers to the multiverse. Starting within a single universe, going beyond it would lead to the superflow, the space between universes. Going further would bring one into the neutral zone, the farthest boundary of the multiverse, where matter and antimatter coexist. While locations like the neutral zone exist outside all universes, they are still contained within the multiverse. But outside, that was different. It was a realm completely beyond the multiverse and beyond eternity's influence. Eternity, the embodiment of the multiverse itself, had no reach there. If one went even farther beyond outside, they would reach the far shore, the domain of the primordial void, also known as oblivion. Gore moved, appearing behind Ashbourne with a sword forged from pure darkness, aiming to end him in a single strike. But before he could land the blow, a ray of holy light blasted him away, sending him rocketing across the void. Mage moved swiftly, weaving spells effortlessly without the need for incantations, his magic illuminating the emptiness of the outside. Warper, even outside reality. You're not powerless. You can create a new reality. Ashbourne's voice echoed through their mental link. Warper froze for a moment, stunned by the realization. But then, something clicked. A spark ignited within him, and reality itself began to bloom from his very being. The force expanded outward, stretching and twisting until it reshaped the outside, flooding the void with existence once more. You heard that right, all of the outside was covered in this new reality birthed from Warper. I'll help you push your power to its fullest. First, rewrite reality. Turn one Warper into two, Ashbourne commanded, his voice sharp and decisive. Warper barely had time to process before his power surged. At first, he created a single clone, then two, but with Ashbourne guiding him, he didn't stop there. In mere moments, millions of Warpers filled the void, each an extension of himself, all sharing the same mind. Warper, if you can imagine it, you can make it real. If one of you isn't strong enough, then create millions, combine your powers, and force reality itself to bow to your will. The sea of Warpers moved as one, their presence flooding the newly formed reality. Gore's eyes widened as he felt his own reality falling under the sea of Warpers' will. But he had no time to hesitate. Tapping into the vast reservoir of genetic power forcefully implanted within him, his body erupted with a surge of energy unlike anything before. The multiverse was infinite, and somewhere within it, a venom symbiote had bonded with nearly every conceivable being: Thor, Hulk, Hope, Iron Man, Franklin Richards, and countless others. Now, every one of their genetic imprints awakened inside Gore, rewriting his very essence. His form twisted further, shedding its half-monster state and transforming into something far worse. A true nightmare, wielding the power of countless titans. Then, to Ashbourne's dismay, Gore's body rippled, and the darkness around him multiplied. Clones. A shadow stretched endlessly across the void, filled with an infinite army of Gores, each carrying the strength of the original. Their collective presence twisted the very fabric of reality, drowning the battlefield in their sheer numbers. Fuck you, why can't this be like the comic? Ashbourne cursed, not liking this hard mood. Impossible battle. Chapter 34. As countless Gores summoned an endless army of shadow creatures, they surged forward at terrifying speed. Their sheer numbers threatened to overwhelm everything in sight. Yet, instead of reacting with urgency, Ashbourne exhaled slowly, his posture relaxing as if he had already won. Mega Mind, Ashbourne called out, his voice calm. In an instant, Mega Mind tapped into the collective power of all Ashbourne's shadows and made his move. But he didn't target Gore. No, his sights were set on the summoned creatures. Every single monster was connected to Gore's mind, an extension of his will. And that connection, it was a fatal flaw Ashbourne had been waiting to exploit. From the moment Gore had summoned his first creature, Ashbourne had begun formulating this plan. Mega Mind had confirmed it was possible, but Ashbourne had played the long game. He had allowed his shadows to feign struggle, to make it seem like they were evenly matched, all to lure Gore into summoning more and more creatures. As the battle raged on, Ashbourne had orchestrated a strategy to gradually overwhelm Gore, forcing him to summon more and more shadow creatures just to keep up. However, the unexpected element of cloning had thrown a wrench into the plan. If the damage was divided among the clones, would it be enough to truly incapacitate him? The seemingly endless army of Gores let out cries of agony as Mega Mind's attack struck, their collective consciousness writhing under the assault. Yet, despite the overwhelming mental damage, they refused to fall. Their minds were battered, but not broken. They could still fight. And worse, they were already beginning to heal. Monarch's domain. Ashbourne unfused with his shadow, allowing it to merge with the reality Warper had created, forming a world of complete darkness. The battlefield transformed. Nothing but an endless abyss under his absolute control. Infinite copies of yourself or not, you'll all die the same way. Ashbourne's voice echoed through the void as his domain expanded, absorbing all of Gore's summoned creatures and turning them into fuel for his power. He closed his eyes, feeling the surge of strength coursing through him, his control over darkness reaching unprecedented heights. Roar. The countless Gores erupted in fury, their anger shaking the very fabric of reality. With mouths gaping, they unleashed beams of pure darkness, each one carrying destructive energy strong enough to erase eternity, all converging toward Ashbourne. Mega Mind didn't just attack your mind to harm you, he made sure you'd attack me too. Ashbourne smirked, his ever-changing weapon shifting into a massive shield in his palm. Gore's pupils shrank in realization. GG. With a wave of his shield, Ashbourne met the endless barrage of beams converging toward him. Supreme Monarch counter. A surge of power exploded from him, and in an instant, every single attack was reflected back, twice as strong as before. Boom. The sheer force shattered Warper's reality, sending ripples across existence. The impact didn't stop there. It reached far beyond, slamming into eternity itself, drawing a pained cry from the embodiment of the multiverse. Ashbourne cast a glance toward eternity, but he had no time to concern himself with its pain. He was exhausted. Supreme Monarch counter was an unrivaled technique, boasting a 100% success rate, but at the steep cost of draining 99% of both his HP and MP. Let's go, Ashbourne said, intending to return to the multiverse and prepare for null. But just as he was about to move, he vanished, dodging in the nick of time as a dark spear whistled past where his neck had been a moment ago. A deafening roar echoed through the void. Gore had returned, stronger than ever. His once multiplied selves had fused into one, pushing his power to unimaginable heights. He was no longer just a threat, he had become a force of destruction, a true monster beyond reason. That has to be cheating, Ashbourne muttered, watching Gore's transformation with a deep frown. The idea of forming clones, fusing with them to grow stronger, and then repeating the cycle, it was absurd. If there was no limit, could he just keep stacking power endlessly? Thanks, Quickie, he said, acknowledging his fastest shadow, a fusion of 5 of the speediest beings in the universe, who had just pulled him away from the fatal strike in time. I'm out of ideas. Just kill this son of a bitch. With those words, the shadows that had been holding back finally unleashed their full might. Ashbourne refuses to go all out because he likes keeping trump cards. The less his enemies know, the more windows for a surprise attack he would have. Power surged forward, wielding the combined strength of every shadow in Ashbourne's army. Energy Master closed in, siphoning Gore's power to fuel his own. One by one, the strongest warriors among Ashbourne's forces engaged, each striking with overwhelming force. Gore, despite his monstrous evolution, was now facing the full fury of the Shadow Monarch. The battle shook the outside, forcing eternity to retreat from the battlefield to avoid being caught in the chaos. Gore was quickly overwhelmed, outnumbered, and steadily overpowered by an army that wasn't just holding its ground, but growing stronger with every passing moment. How many shadows had the ability to absorb energy? Too many for Gore to handle. While a single shadow might not have been able to contain the sheer magnitude of Gore's power, they spread it out among the rest, ensuring the army as a whole continued to evolve mid-battle. But the true turning point came when power, the fusion of Rogue and Hope, felt herself breaking past her former limitations. In the past, her abilities had been bound by 2 conditions: copying the powers of mutants and physically absorbing the powers of non-mutants. But now, those restrictions had shattered. She could copy any power within range, seen or unseen, mutant or not. Even Gore's terrifying strength wasn't out of reach. However, she needed time, as Gore's power was just too much for her to instantly copy it all. Warper was beginning to understand how to warp his own reality, and in doing so, he realized something profound: being outside of reality didn't limit him, it freed him. Without the constraints of an established existence, he could reshape himself at will. It was like having an endless stat screen where he could tweak his abilities, grant himself new powers, and evolve without limits. Meanwhile, Ashbourne watched his shadows steadily grow stronger with every clash, their abilities sharpening and adapting as the battle raged on. The more they fought, the more refined and unstoppable they became. Are you making any progress, All Sight? Ashbourne asked, glancing toward All Sight, who stood at his side, observing the battlefield. Yes, it seems like my eyesight is evolving. I believe soon I will be able to see everything, and beyond the multiverse, beyond the outside, All Sight said, his eyes, which seemed to hold all of outer space, locked onto the battle unfolding before them. Chapter 35 Inches Good. It's nice to see that you all can continue growing stronger, Ashbourne said calmly, watching as Gore was slowly overwhelmed. Gore was fighting on too many fronts, battling against Ashbourne's army in the physical world while simultaneously struggling against Megamind's relentless assault on his mind. The mental warfare was the key to their victory, forcing Gore to split his focus and making it impossible for him to fight at full strength. However, despite being on the defensive, Gore was adapting, steadily growing stronger with each passing moment. I've noticed something, my lord. Gore's genetic structure contains the genetic code of all lifeforms across the multiverse. It didn't fully integrate with his body, which is why he has that monstrous form, All Sight observed. I already figured as much. What are you getting at? Ashbourne asked casually, his gaze still locked onto the battle. Simple. We target his genetics instead of his body. His genetic structure is his greatest weakness. In fact, there's a chance he might evolve to correct those flaws. If we start tampering with his genetics, we won't even have to kill him. His own power will do the job for us, All Sight explained, causing Ashbourne to sigh. He hadn't thought of such a straightforward solution. You all heard him. Bio, take the lead. Ashbourne commanded, and in an instant, the most advanced biological manipulator in his shadow army shot forward. Bio was a fusion of beings like Elixir, Tarn, Armando Munoz, and the most capable celestials in biology. If anyone could break Gore down at his very core, it was him. If you're wondering how Armando became a zombie, the answer is simple. He wasn't turned, he turned himself. Armando was powerful, capable of adapting to nearly anything that could harm him. But his power had limits. For example, when he faced the World Breaker Hulk, he didn't adapt to fight the Hulk. Instead, his ability teleported him away, recognizing that Hulk's sheer strength was beyond its capacity to counter. The zombie virus, being something far beyond his natural adaptability, triggered an unusual response. Rather than resisting the infection, his power adapted by transforming him into a zombie, essentially making him a zombie capable of controlling to avoid being consumed by the outside virus. As for how Ashbourne killed him, well, he didn't. Odin did. While Armando was teleporting across the universe, desperately avoiding Ashbourne, All Sight took notice. Odin wasted no time, striking him down in a single blow. Regardless, Bio was one of Ashbourne's most formidable shadows. With a mere thought, he could evolve or devolve any being within his range, on a multiversal scale. Now, Bio shot toward Gore, with all the shadows working to clear a path. Gore was too powerful for Bio to manipulate his DNA from a distance, physical contact was necessary. The battle intensified as they fought to get Bio close enough to touch Gore. Susan created a barrier, shielding Bio as he advanced. Warper manipulated his own reality, temporarily granting himself the strength to stand toe-to-toe with Gore, at least until his body began to strain under the immense power. Meanwhile, creatures of all kinds, rabbits, ants, and countless others, crawled onto Gore, draining his energy. Ashbourne had gifted them the ability to absorb shadows, turning even the smallest beings into weapons against their enemy. Gore was already struggling, but with his focus divided as he tried to keep Bio at bay, he left himself open. Power seized the opportunity. Wielding every ability imaginable, she channeled all of her strength into her fist and drove it into Gore's monstrous chin with reality-shattering force. I summon the power of the Phoenix Force. Mage declared, stepping forward as he began his chant. With his immense power, there were few places from which he could draw additional strength. But the answer was simple. He could call upon higher dimensional beings. Far beyond the outside, past the far shore, lay the white-hot room, the true domain of the Phoenix Force. Not the mere avatar that had fused with Mega Mind, but its purest form, the cosmic fire that shaped existence itself. I call upon your power. Bathe my enemy in the flames that forged creation. Mage's voice boomed as a colossal magic circle formed above Gore. From it, a storm of divine fire rained down, each ember carrying the weight of the Phoenix's might, descending upon Gore like the wrath of the cosmos itself. What? You thought Gore was powerful just because eternity itself had to flee from their clash. That was nothing. The true form of the Phoenix Force stood infinitely above everyone on this battlefield, beyond comprehension. Mage was already a force to be reckoned with, his power so immense that he could draw strength from himself alone. But in this battle, he sought more. He looked beyond eternity itself, reaching into the depths of existence for a greater source of power. And he found it. The true form of the Phoenix Force had answered his call. Not just anyone could achieve such a feat. To reach so far, to channel a power so vast, required an overwhelming mastery of magic, and understanding of the cosmos itself. The spell Mage had woven was more than just an incantation, it was a testament to his might. And now, the darkness burned as the flames of creation descended upon Gore. Gore's pained roars echoed through the void as the flames consumed him, burning away at his very essence while leaving everything else untouched. He tried to move, to fight back, but then, he felt it. A hand. His gaze snapped downward, and there, gripping him, was Bio. Instantly, chaos erupted within Gore's body. His already unstable genes turned against him, spiraling into a self-destructive frenzy. His cells, unable to coexist, tore at one another, warring within him. Agony unlike anything he had ever known racked his form, compounded by the unrelenting flames of the Phoenix Force. This battle is over, Ashbourne said simply, turning away toward eternity. Behind him, Gore's body twisted and convulsed, deforming beyond recognition before finally, boom, he exploded. Chapter 36 bonus chapter for the 500 Power Stones. Want more chapters? Feed my greed. Cash app me. Itachi 1010 author I bring this stuff up because I have a life. I can't do 2 chapters per day, every day. Motivate me enough and I can even drop like 5 chapters. I'm not saying I will drop the novel, just don't expect a daily update. This battle is over, Ashbourne said simply, turning away toward eternity. Behind him, Gore's body twisted and convulsed, deforming beyond recognition before finally, boom, he exploded. Yet, even as his remains scattered across the battlefield, something unnatural happened. The shattered fragments of Gore did not fade. Instead, they began to shift, writhing through space, drawn together by an unseen force. And then, they reformed. Ashbourne turned, watching as the remnants of Gore reshaped into something entirely new. Slowly, a white-haired man emerged, clad in armor as dark as the void itself, absorbing all light around it. A crimson, dragon-like emblem rested on his chest, an ominous contrast against the pitch-black metal. So, you wish to challenge my authority? The man's voice was deep, resonating with an undeniable weight. Ashbourne's eyes narrowed in shock for a brief moment, but as realization dawned, his expression shifted into something more composed. You used Gore's body as a vessel to manifest outside the primordial void, meaning you're not just null from within eternity, but the true null. Ashbourne exhaled in irritation. Of course. This wasn't the null from the comics or even that one Venom movie. This was worse. This was the true form of null, not his avatar within the eternity. It was safe to assume that null possessed every power across the multiverse, given that he now held the genetic code of all lifeforms. Unlike Gore, he wasn't a mindless berserker. He was controlled, calculated, and far more powerful. Ashbourne exhaled, already preparing for the worst. He wasn't just fighting null. He was facing a superior version, one that surpassed even the comic iterations. Still, this wasn't Null's true body, just a vessel. That meant there was still a chance, however slim, to win. Null extended his hand, summoning the all-black sword. Only this wasn't the weaker version that had fused with Gore, nor the one seen in the MCU. This was the original blade, forged in the primordial void, imbued with the essence of oblivion itself. With a single, effortless wave, the battlefield shifted. Ashbourne's weaker shadows, his cannon fodder, simply ceased to exist. The rabbits, the ants, the endless numbers of smaller creatures he had erased in an instant. The stronger shadows remained, but they were barely holding together, damaged, and on the verge of disappearing. Weak, Null said, his voice carrying an eerie finality. For a brief moment, Ashbourne's heart skipped a beat, but in the next instant, his eyes turned cold. Without hesitation, he flashed forward, appearing directly before Null while recalling all of his remaining shadows into his own darkness. Supreme revenge counter. Ashbourne roared, meeting Null's descending blade head-on. Blood erupted from Ashbourne's nose, gushing from his ears and mouth. His eyes burned crimson, bloodshot from the unbearable strain. He had pushed himself beyond his limits, past what his body should have been able to withstand, for this one attack to land. Boom. The outside trembled. Everything shook. The impact sent devastating ripples cascading through the far shore, warping the very fabric of existence. It was so catastrophic that someone had to step in. A golden giant appeared, standing between eternity and the devastation. His form radiated an overwhelming presence, his massive body glowing with cosmic energy. His chest pulsed with a bright blue light, and his head floated above his shoulders, detached yet controlled. 3 heads adorned his form, though 2 were concealed beneath a veil, leaving only the forward-facing head fully visible. The leftmost head, partially uncovered, revealed only its chin. The golden giant floated toward Ashbourne, gripping the hammer of judgment in his colossal hand. Ashbourne, suspended in the void, barely able to move, watched as his shadows instinctively summoned themselves to shield him. Yes, Ashbourne had one-shotted Null. But the cost was staggering. Supreme Revenge Counter, a technique Ashbourne had created himself, was a devastating ability. It took the combined damage he and his shadows had suffered and reflected it back at the enemy, amplified tenfold. However, there was a far more dangerous effect. If Ashbourne's HP dropped below 5% while using the technique, he would forcibly swap HP with the target. In doing so, he would steal 95% of the enemy's HP, leaving them with only 5% remaining. But this technique wasn't just raw force, it was omnidirectional damage. It attacked physically, spiritually, mentally, and even conceptually, a total assault on every aspect of existence itself. Drawbacks: the technique could only activate if Ashbourne physically touched the target. If the enemy's HP vastly outmatched Ashbourne's, then absorbing 95% of it could overwhelm and potentially kill him instead. The enemy, though weakened to 5% HP, was still free to act. And if they were strong enough, that remaining 5% might still be too much to handle. Null hadn't just damaged Ashbourne, he had killed his shadows. Unlike normal defeats where his soldiers could be resummoned, the shadows that Null erased were gone forever. Ashbourne had already been at 1% HP before activating the technique, he had ensured his HP remained at 1%. This meant that Null's HP also dropped to 1% before he suffered the full force of the accumulated damage from billions of shadows. So yes, Null was one-shotted. But Ashbourne was left completely drained, unable to move, his body frozen from the unimaginable strain. And now, he could do nothing but watch as the living tribunal stood before him. Ashbourne's frown deepened as he locked eyes with the cosmic judge. The golden giant hovered above him, his face filled with unwavering fury, his massive form casting an inescapable judgment over the battlefield. "I have allowed you to act unchecked for far too long," the tribunal declared, his booming voice shaking the very fabric of existence. The hammer of judgment rose high into the sky, crackling with unfathomable power, one that did not merely punish but could erase beings from existence entirely. And then, it fell, aimed directly at Ashbourne. The shadows surged forward, their sheer numbers forming an impenetrable barrier around Ashbourne. But they were nothing before the living tribunal's authority. They were overwhelmed instantly. The hammer of judgment struck Ashbourne dead on, sending him rocketing through the void. Yet, there was no damage. A stunned silence followed. What? The living tribunal said in shock. Chapter 37. The hammer of judgment struck Ashbourne dead on, sending him rocketing through the void. Yet, there was no damage. A stunned silence followed. What? The living tribunal's voice trembled with disbelief, his eyes narrowing as he looked down at the hammer in his grasp. And then, it hit him. His cosmic senses expanded, analyzing the battle, tracing back every action Ashbourne had taken. He had done nothing wrong. Or rather, he had been allowed to do everything he did. The balance of existence had indeed been shaken, but most of the destruction had been in self-defense. The tribunal could not pass judgment on a being that had merely fought to survive. A long silence stretched between them as the tribunal deliberated. He could still act. He could throw the hammer aside and erase Ashbourne by sheer force alone. But as he gripped his hammer, considering that very thought, he found that he couldn't. A deep sigh left him. He turned, preparing to depart, yet just as he did, his senses flared, catching something. A gateway to the far shore tore open, a rift in existence itself, and from its depths, a force shot forward, aiming straight for Ashbourne. The living tribunal watched, his expression unreadable, contemplating whether to intervene. For a brief moment, he considered ignoring it, letting fate take its course. But in the end, he made his choice. Boom! The hammer of judgment came crashing down, colliding against the incoming force. "Don't you dare!" The living tribunal roared, his 3 voices merging into one, his golden aura flaring as he clashed with oblivion itself. But this time, something was different. In the past, The tribunal had bested Oblivion, beaten it back into the void where it belonged. This time, Oblivion did not flee. The full might of the void surged forth, pressing against the tribunal with an intensity unlike anything before. The tribunal staggered, his grip on his hammer tightening. For the first time in eons, he was being forced back. His rage erupted. You dare! All three heads of the living tribunal spoke at once. The cloth that had long covered the two hidden faces was suddenly torn away, revealing their true forms, and with them, a power unlike anything the multiverse had ever felt before. In the name of the one above all, I revoke your right to ever step beyond the far shore. The living tribunal roared, his three faces glowing with celestial authority as existence itself bent to his decree. Boom! A force unlike any other surged forth, shifting the very laws of reality, binding Oblivion, and hurling it back into the far shore, a realm from which it should never have emerged. But then, Oblivion ignored the laws. Crack! Reality fractured as the primordial void forcefully willed itself back into existence. The tribunal's command, an absolute law upon which the multiverse stood, was shattered as if it were nothing. And in the midst of it all, Ashbourne ran. By now, he could move again, and he was fleeing as fast as possible, wanting nothing to do with a battle of this scale. This was beyond him. The living tribunal's rage erupted, golden energy surging as he turned his fury toward Oblivion. How dare it? Who was he? He was the LAW. The absolute force of balance. The cosmic judge of existence. And yet, Oblivion was his counterpart. His equal. For too long, Oblivion had never fought back with its full might. For too long, it had let itself be pushed away with ease. And the reason? It had never seen the time as right for the end to arrive. A battle that shook existence itself began, as Oblivion refused to relent, its will absolute, it wanted Ashbourne dead at all costs. The living tribunal, the embodiment of the law of existence, would not allow such a disruption, for no one could defy the balance he upheld. Their clash sent shockwaves rippling across all of reality, shaking the very foundation of creation as forces beyond comprehension collided in an all-out war of cosmic magnitude. Despite his best efforts to remain uninvolved, Ashbourne quickly found himself caught in the chaos. The battlefield was beyond the limits of space and time, stretching across creation. Then, it happened. A deep, resounding crack echoed through the omniverse as fractures spread across the fabric of existence. These weren't mere disruptions in space or time, but something far worse, something that shouldn't have been possible. The omniverse itself, the highest concept of all that was, had begun to break apart. Fun fact: eternity is considered to be an omniverse instead of a multiverse. So, in the comic when Odin tore the fabric of the multiverse, that wasn't a multiversal level feat. And before Ashbourne could react, before he could even consider escaping, one of those cracks expanded and swallowed him whole. The living tribunal, despite noticing this, did nothing. His duty was to the balance, not to individuals, and he would not waste his power protecting someone. His golden gaze remained fixed upon the abyss, unmoved, indifferent to Ashbourne's fate. But then, a sudden burst of golden flames erupted into the void, flooding the darkness with divine radiance. The true form of the Phoenix Force had arrived. Unlike its many lesser manifestations, this was the Phoenix in its purest, most absolute state, and it moved with purpose, reaching out with an unparalleled surge of power, seeking to pull Ashbourne back from the unknown. Yet, despite its immeasurable might, it was too late. For some unknown reason, the crack in reality vanished. Not just the one that had taken Ashbourne, but all of them. Across every plane of existence, every dimension, every reality, the fractures that had threatened to unravel creation were erased in an instant, as if they had never existed to begin with. Oblivion, the living tribunal, and the Phoenix Force all froze in place, their titanic struggle forgotten as an unsettling realization settled over them. Their eyes turned, not toward the multiverse, not toward the outside, not even toward the far shore where the primordial void loomed, but beyond. Far beyond. Chapter 38. In the sky, a crack in reality split open, distorting the very fabric of existence. From within the rupture, a badly damaged human figure plummeted toward the city below at breakneck speed. The figure crashed into a park with an earth-shaking impact, obliterating the area upon contact and sending nearby civilians hurtling through the air. Before they could hit the ground, a blur of red and blue streaked across the scene. Moving faster than the eye could track, The figure caught each person midair, safely placing them far from danger before coming to a stop. His red cape billowed behind him as he hovered in the air, a striking young man with a presence that radiated strength and authority. His eyes glowed faintly, piercing through the thick dust cloud that had risen from the crash. Beyond the haze, his gaze locked onto the unconscious human lying at the center of the crater, motionless and battered. Shocked, he vanished in an instant, seemingly teleporting beside the unconscious young man, who was lying completely bare in the aftermath of the crash. Wasting no time, he scooped him up and disappeared again, not toward a hospital, but to a teleporter station nearby. A flash of light engulfed them, and the next moment, they reappeared in the vastness of space, inside a massive watchtower floating above Earth. Dozens, no, hundreds, of heroes gathered in the hallways, their eyes locked on the unconscious figure in his arms. Whispers filled the air, curiosity and concern evident on their faces, but he didn't stop to explain. He moved swiftly, heading straight for the medical bay, where the most advanced technology from across the universe awaited, tools capable of saving even those on the brink of death. It's weird. He just fell from a crack in space, Cyborg said, projecting a hologram of the incident from his palm. The footage displayed a young man plummeting from the tear in reality before crashing into the park below. That wasn't just a crack in space, it was a tear in reality, a deep voice stated. A man dressed in black stepped out of the shadows, his presence startling the gathered heroes. Despite the sheer number of them, none had sensed his arrival. What do you mean? Asked a blonde-haired man clad in a green skin-tight uniform, his brow furrowing in confusion as he turned toward the newcomer. His genetics, the very building blocks of his existence, are completely different from anything in our universe or even the rest of the known multiverse, the man in black said, his gaze fixed on the unconscious figure. The stranger's face was badly disfigured, bearing the marks of whatever had torn through him during his journey. Judging by the damage, it seemed as if he had passed through a cosmic storm. His power is immense, he continued. I'd say even Superman would struggle against him at his peak. So be cautious with him here. With that, he plucked a loose strand of hair and a fragment of skin from the unconscious man before turning on his heel and disappearing into the shadows, leaving the gathered heroes to process his words. It wouldn't be wise to ignore Batman's words, a woman dressed in what looked to be striper clothing said seriously. A golden lasso hung at her side, its presence alone demanding respect. The gathered heroes exchanged glances before nodding in agreement. Without hesitation, the disfigured young man was carefully moved to a more secure and reinforced room, ensuring that, should he awaken with hostile intent, they would be prepared. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Weird, I can't see, Ashbourne muttered, his voice echoing through the endless void. He should be able to see in absolute darkness, yet all he saw was darkness. He took a cautious step forward, then another, feeling nothing beneath him yet somehow moving forward. Darkness stretched in every direction, thick and absolute, offering no sense of direction or space. He wasn't sure how long he wandered, minutes, hours, or even days. Time felt meaningless here. Just as frustration began to gnaw at him, a faint glow appeared in the distance. A flicker of hope surged through him, and without hesitation, he sprinted toward it. The closer he got, the more the darkness thinned, giving way to soft, golden light. Then, suddenly, his foot met something solid. A strange yet familiar sensation spread beneath him, and as he looked down, his breath caught in his throat. A cloud. His body tensed, realization hitting him like a crashing wave. He had stood here before. A chuckle echoed through the sky, warm yet laced with amusement. You didn't expect to see me again so soon, did you? Ashbourne turned toward the voice, already knowing who it belonged to. With a heavy sigh, his shoulders slumped. Well, what could I do against the likes of Oblivion? Honestly, all this, infinitely greater, stuff is getting annoying. That storm I faced between words was way too overpowered. Even with the mother storm trying to absorb it, I still ended up dying, Ashbourne sighed, rubbing his temple before taking a seat in front of the old man. Haha, indeed. It's difficult to wrap your head around, the old man chuckled. But to make it easier, just think of it like this. There's an infinite number of decimal numbers between 0 and 1, 1 and 2, not all infinities are equal. Infinity is everywhere. You're either too strong to notice it, or too weak to notice it. By the way, you're not dead. Ashbourne frowned slightly, processing the words, but then something else caught his attention. Wait. You just said I'm not dead. He asked, confusion flickering across his face. Ashbourne wasn't confused about the decimal numbers part. That much made sense. Infinity existed everywhere. It wasn't some abstract concept, but a fundamental part of reality. The issue wasn't understanding infinity, it was dealing with its implications. When one had enough power to destroy a universe, it was easy to assume that being 500 million times stronger would allow them to destroy an entire multiverse. But no, that was just enough to destroy 500 million universes, not the infinite layers beyond them. So the real question was, how strong did Ashbourne need to become for even his weakest shadows to reach heights capable of destroying a universe? How could you multiply 10 and reach infinity? The answer was simple. You couldn't. No matter how much mastery he gained over his power or how much stronger he became, the multipliers his rabbit's shadows received would never be enough to push them into the realm of true infinity or the greater infinities that lay beyond. I'm not dead, Ashbourne asked again, still in shock. He was certain he had died, but to his surprise, he hadn't. Haha. Nope, right now, you're in a state of half-death. When you can touch death, truly grasp its complexity, you'll be able to wake up, and as a bonus, you'll gain a massive boost in power. I even helped out by bringing you somewhere where death is far stronger, the old man said with a knowing smile. What do you mean? Ashbourne asked, frowning in confusion. But the old man simply smiled, refusing to answer. Can I at least know why you wanted me to be a shadow monarch? Seeing all the power at my disposal, I can't help but think there's more to your decision than just chance, Ashbourne said, watching the old man closely. If he wasn't going to answer the previous question, maybe this one would get something out of him. The old man paused for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with a small sigh, he finally spoke. When the time comes, you'll understand. Sorry, kid, I'm not trying to act all mysterious or anything. It's just that you have free will, and my words might influence your choices. I don't want that. Ashbourne raised an eyebrow at that response but, after a brief moment of consideration, simply shrugged. Fair enough. It should be easy for you to grasp death. After all, you've already died once. So, good luck, the old man said with a smile. Before Ashbourne could respond, he found himself once again surrounded by darkness, only this time, there was nothing beneath him, nothing to stand on. He simply floated in the void, weightless, directionless. With no other choice, he closed his eyes, letting his mind drift back to his past life, the moment before he blew himself up, the feeling of destruction overtaking him. Then, his thoughts wandered to his clash with the cosmic storm, the overwhelming force that had nearly erased him from existence. He floated in that emptiness, memories shifting like waves. Soon, his mind turned to the world of zombies, the creatures he had been surrounded by for so long. They were beings that should have perished, yet remained animated, lingering in a state between life and death. That universe had no concept of true death, and yet, in a way, he had been standing at death's door the entire time without realizing it. What is this, some kind of cultivation novel? Ashbourne chuckled, a smirk forming on his lips as he fully embraced the moment when death first took hold of him in his past life. That fleeting instant when he had stepped through the doorway of death, neither alive nor truly gone. He had died once before, yet here he was again, standing at the precipice, staring into the abyss. Only this time, instead of resisting, he reached out, grasping the essence of death itself. Chapter 39 Inches You're Not From Here, a charming voice echoed, drawing Ashbourne's attention. His gaze landed on a beautiful goth girl who was sizing him up with a curious expression. For a split second, he was caught off guard by her beauty, but he quickly snapped back to reality when he realized who she was. Death? He asked, his voice laced with disbelief. This wasn't the Marvel Universe's death. No, she was different. This was Death of the Endless, a being that shouldn't even be here. At your pleasure, she said with a friendly smile. You seem to be from next door. It's been a while since I've been there. What? Ashbourne asked, momentarily speechless. Death nodded. I stopped by Rick Jones and Marlo Chandler's wedding, but that's not important. What's impressive is that you somehow passed through the barriers of our two worlds and only suffered such light injuries. Ashbourne's eye twitched. Light injuries. He was in a half-dead state, barely clinging to existence. What part of that was impressive? Weird, he muttered, watching as Death's form began to shift, twisting and distorting in ways that made his mind reel. Death paused, her eyes widening as she realized what was happening. Ashbourne wasn't just seeing her. He was seeing through her chosen form. The illusion of a charming goth girl wavered, and for the first time, his evolving mind caught a glimpse of her true form. The sight horrified him. For all his power, for everything he had seen, nothing could have prepared him for this. This wasn't just a personification of death. It was death itself in its purest, most incomprehensible state. It was a concept given form, a force beyond time, beyond space, beyond anything his mortal mind had ever been able to grasp. For the death standing before Ashbourne wasn't the weak death found in Marvel, the one that merely governed the process of the living dying. No, the being before him was the end itself. She had been there at the beginning of the DC universe, and she would be there at its final breath. When anything ended, be it a thought, an era, a relationship, a life, or even something as small as a fleeting moment, it was because of her. She was the end, the ultimate finality, the force that closed the book on all things. And such a being now stood before him. For the first time in a long time, something made Ashbourne's very soul tremble. The sheer weight of her existence, the sheer concept of what she was, threatened to crush him under its presence. But then, his fists clenched. He suppressed that fear. Why? Because his potential was limitless. So limitless that one day, he would rule over the end itself. That endpoint, that darkness, that finality, was that not his destiny? Why should he fear the end, when one day, he would reign over it? What's this? Death stepped back, genuinely shocked by the darkness exploding off Ashbourne. The Shadow Monarch force, it hadn't just grown stronger. No, stronger wasn't the right word anymore. As Ashbourne gazed into death itself, grasping even a fraction of its secrets, how could his mastery of his own power remain stagnant? His very being evolved in that moment. Ashbourne straightened, eyes gleaming with newfound understanding. I'm Ashbourne Blackheart, the future overlord of the primordial void. It was a pleasure meeting you. With those words, the dark world shattered. A heartbeat later, Ashbourne's eyes snapped open, only to find himself lying in what looked like a hospital room. Due to unforeseen events, the host has found himself outside of the Marvel Omniverse. The system has decided to remain with the host and is currently charging energy to send the host back home. The host has suffered serious injuries from battling the end storm. All stats have been suppressed, and every ounce of energy is being used to keep the host alive. Restoring full strength. The host has grasped death of the endless and witnessed the end itself. The host's Shadow Monarch force has evolved. Having seen the birth and end of all sets of infinity, shadows will no longer be measured in multipliers of their former strength. Instead, they will bathe in the host's power to grow, just as the host will bathe in their strength to evolve in turn. Note, this does not mean the host and all shadows will be equal in power. Rather, it places both on the same level of infinity, albeit with many limitations. However, as the host is currently outside of the Marvel-verse, this ability is locked until further notice. Mission complete. Gore the God Butcher objective. Kill the evolved God Butcher within the given time. Reward: 3x 100% shadow extraction chances. Mission complete. He has awakened objective. Survive or kill the Eldritch God of Darkness. Reward: depends on success. Mission complete. The Voids will objective. Survive the Void's attempt to devour you. Reward: depends on success. Reward for the He has awakened quest. Undying Shadows. Undying Shadows, you are now the core of all your shadows' existence. If any shadow is ever killed or erased, they will return to you, and in 1 week, they will be fully reformed and ready for battle once more. Reward for that the Voids will quest. Evolution into a mutated Monarch race. Monarch description. As one of the 2 races created by the Absolute Being in the solo-leveling universe, the Monarchs are among the strongest beings in existence, surpassed only by the gods. Their strength scales at a universal level, making them incredibly powerful. However, this race is not without flaws. Due to their mana-based biology and lack of organic forms, monarchs cannot freely cross into the human world without a suitable human vessel, a trait they share with the rulers. Unlike the rulers, however, monarchs fully possess their vessels, stealing their bodies for their own use. While this technique allows monarchs to exert their full power in the human world, it also means that if their human vessel is slain, the monarch perishes as well. Monarchs are weak compared to the Marvel world. They would struggle to destroy a single dimension, considering how many extra dimensions and realities a single universe contains, Ashbourne thought as he reviewed the information before him. His gaze shifted to the sea of mutations available for selection. Chapter 40 Race. Super Monarch Description. A monarch that has evolved beyond its limits, ascending to a state where they can suppress the gods, wielding universal plus levels of power. Super monarchs are born with a vast array of innate abilities, including the power of creation and destruction, mastery over all abilities possessed by lesser monarchs, and more. However, this evolution is not without flaws. Due to their overwhelming power, super monarchs exist within a dimension far removed from the human world. If they were to stand next to a normal human, the sheer force of their existence would erase the human from reality, even if the super monarch had no intention of doing so. To enter the human world, a powerful vessel is required. However, even with a suitable vessel, it would be impossible for the super monarch to unleash their full might, as the vessel would incinerate under the strain of containing their true power. The list of possible mutations Ashbourne could choose from was endless. Options ranged from Monarch King to Shadow Monarch, and many more, each offering different strengths and weaknesses. But in the end, Ashbourne, naturally, set his sights on the strongest mutation available. Race. Sovereign description. The sovereign is an evolution beyond monarchs and even the gods. They are a race of higher dimensional beings with limitless growth potential. Unlike gods, who can perish under the right conditions, sovereigns are truly immortal. Simply killing them is not enough to erase their existence. While monarchs require vessels to enter lower dimensions, sovereigns exist between the physical and spiritual realms, allowing them to freely shift between a corporeal and ethereal state with just a thought. This removes the limitations of needing a vessel and grants them unmatched autonomy across dimensions. Additionally, sovereigns possess an innate mastery over their own power, with instincts so sharp that they can immediately adapt to and control their full strength. This ensures that, unlike lesser beings, their presence alone will not unintentionally destroy those around them, making them the ultimate rulers of existence. Of course, Ashbourne chose to become a sovereign. The prospect of endless growth was simply too tempting to ignore. Race evolution complete. Sovereign new abilities gained. The immortal shadow, your existence is now bound to your shadows. As long as even a single shadow remains, you cannot die, even if your physical body is reduced to ashes. This also means you no longer require food, water, or air to survive. Limitless, your body has no upper limits. The more pressure it endures, the faster it adapts. The more energy it holds, the quicker it evolves to handle greater levels of power. Creation and destruction. A sovereign's power is absolute. With one hand, you can create nearly anything. With the other, you can destroy it just as easily. Shadow Link. A sovereign is eternally connected to their army. What belongs to your shadows belongs to you, and what belongs to you belongs to them. Because of this, every ability your army possesses is also yours, waiting for you to tap into its full potential. Shadow Instincts. A sovereign does not struggle to master their own power. The shadows bend to your will, awaiting your command. Even without an order, they will act to fulfill your desires, for you are their absolute ruler. Nice. Ashbourne thought as he reviewed his new skills, feeling the surge of power coursing through him. His mastery over Shadow Monarch Force had finally reached its peak, or at least, the highest level his body could currently handle. That part annoyed him. He had assumed that by mastering his power, he would instantly be capable of covering the entire omniverse in darkness. But reality proved otherwise. His mind and body simply weren't ready to withstand that level of absolute power. The burden would crush him if he pushed too far. Still, his body and mind would adapt to be able to use that power. And then, there was the darkness itself, a force with its own will. Until Ashbourne fully conquered and bent it to his command, there would always be limits to what he could achieve. Even without calling upon Shadow Monarch Force, Ashbourne was already physically stronger than Thor. In terms of raw power, he could crush Thor effortlessly, with Odin being the only one who could offer him a true challenge. But with Shadow Monarch Force, Ashbourne dared to say he could have stood against Gore before he fused with his clones and fought him to a standstill. That alone was terrifying. But what was even more impressive was how much his shadows had grown alongside him. Just as he was reveling in this realization, a sudden voice echoed in his mind. You should lower your charm. Normal humans can't handle it, they'll melt. The words caught Ashbourne off guard, his eyes widening slightly. Only then did he notice the thin veil of flames surrounding his body, holding his appearance from others. You came with me, Ashbourne asked in Shockies. When the hammer fell upon you, I left Megamind and fused with you, but I wasn't needed since you did nothing wrong. The Phoenix Force said. Thanks. Ashbourne said before looking at his stats. But before he could even look at his stats window, he saw a new window. Due to the host's current strength, the system has changed a few things. From now on, one stat equals infinity. To make things simple, please look below. Infinity normal 1 stats equals 1 asterisk stat infinity 1 asterisk stat equals 1 asterisk stats are equal to an infinite 1 stat. 1 asterisk equals universal level destruction. For every 1 stat that equals 1 infinite size dimension 1 can destroy infinity 1 asterisk equals 1 asterisk 1 asterisk stats are multiversal, meaning that for every 1 stat, 1 could destroy an infinite number of infinite size multiverses. Infinity 1 asterisk equals 1 plus stats are beyond multiversal, meaning that with every 1 stat, 1 could destroy an infinite number of infinite size multiverses. Low omniversal infinity 1 plus equals 1 plus is where beings like Trueform Eternity stand. Mid omniversal infinity 1 plus equals 1 plus is where beings like the Living Tribunal, the True Phoenix Force, and True Oblivion stand. Status Screen Name Ashbourne Blackheart Race. Sovereign Age 15 days and 2 hours old level 100 titles. Undead Slayer, Impossible Killer, Touch the Void, Weak Point Attacker, Triumphant Over Adversity, Overlord of Universe 2149. AT Tributes Power 1 million plus you're currently recovering, current stat 500 million speed 1 million plus you're currently recovering, current stat 500 million durability 500,000 plus you're currently recovering, current stat 500 million intelligence 900,000 plus you're currently recovering, current stat 500 million charm 100,000 you're currently recovering, current stat 500 million. Class and skills job class Shadow Monarch skills Shadow Monarch force, Shadow inventory, unwilling, Shadow weapon overlord, detoxification, tenacity, longevity, Shadow mood, Shadow enhancement, +99 self-created skills. Job-specific skills Shadow extraction, Shadow preservation v3, Shadow exchange, Monarch's domain, Shadow fusing v2, undying shadows, the immortal shadow. I'm low omniversal. I wonder what's the strongest being I could turn into a shadow. Ashbourne mused over his newfound strength while suppressing his charm, ensuring that normal humans wouldn't have their minds melt just from looking at him. Before he could even sit up, a commotion erupted outside his room. What's happening? The voices of multiple people reached his ears as the door burst open, and a group of DC heroes entered, expressions uneasy and tense. Through the thin veil of fire surrounding him, Ashbourne easily saw Cyborg, standing at the forefront, along with several others who had gathered. The flames covering Ashbourne's body vanished as he stood up from the bed, stretching his limbs. His newfound power coursed through him, making it feel as if he were inhabiting an entirely new body. The sensation was exhilarating, but what excited him the most was the fact that he had finally unlocked comic awareness, a passive ability that allowed him to just know things as long as his mind could handle the influx of knowledge. It was as if the entire sequence of events from the moment he arrived in this world had always been there, simply waiting for him to notice. Every detail, every action, and every thought that had surrounded him was now clear in his mind. With a casual roll of his shoulders, he looked at the heroes and spoke. Chapter 41 Inches Thanks for saving me. It would have been a pain if I landed in Lex's hands or something. His tone was light because even in Lex's hands, he had nothing to worry about. No problem, but can we get some information from you? You just fell out of the sky, the Flash asked, his tone light but laced with curiosity. Ashbourne nodded slightly, acknowledging the request. I was sucked into a crack between our two worlds. There, I fought a void storm, and, well, let's just say it beat me up pretty badly. But in the end, I managed to devour it. If I hadn't, it would have followed me here and wreaked havoc on your world. He spoke casually, as if he hadn't just described an apocalyptic battle, but his words left an uneasy silence in the room. As he finished, his eyes flickered around, finally, noticing his armor was missing. By the way, you guys didn't happen to see my armor. It's all black and gives off a dark aura visible to the naked eye, Ashbourne asked, glancing around the room. The heroes exchanged looks before shaking their heads. You were naked when we found you, Green Lantern said with a frown. Ashbourne shrugged. It's bound to show up eventually. He glanced down at the simple robes covering him. With a thought, darkness engulfed him, and when it faded, his clothing had transformed. A near-perfect replica of his level 20 gear, its intricate black and silver patterns reflecting the light in an eerie but elegant manner. Should we be worried about the armor? Shazam asked, feeling uneasy about how it had been described. I don't think so, Ashbourne replied with a shrug. But whoever finds it might get a huge strength boost. I can't say if that power would come with side effects, though, I've never let anyone other than myself use it. The heroes exchanged wary glances, but before they could ask anything else, Ashbourne simply raised a hand in a casual wave. Well, peace. With that, shadows engulfed him, and in the blink of an eye, he vanished, only to reappear in the middle of a busy street, surrounded by civilians of planet Earth. He took a deep breath, happy to smell something other than rotten flesh, the good old smell of pollution, how he had missed it. So, do you want to stay fused with me, or would you rather leave and walk around? I can help your body of fire take the form of flesh, Ashbourne asked casually. The Phoenix Force, residing within him, paused for a moment before finally agreeing. Flames gathered in his palm, swirling with an otherworldly intensity. Strangely, no one around them seemed to notice, as if Ashbourne were invisible, his presence slipping past their awareness like a shadow in the wind. On his palm, the Phoenix Force erupted, forming a swirling fire tornado that quickly dissipated. In its place stood a woman, her hair catching the light like living flames, shifting between fiery hues as the sun hit it just right. She was breathtaking, a beauty that could rival even the goddess of love herself. She floated inches above Ashbourne's palm before gradually descending to the ground. The moment her feet touched the surface, her expression twisted in discomfort, her hands instinctively flying to her throat. Struggling to breathe, she gasped as panic flickered in her eyes. As the Phoenix Force, she had never needed air before. A concept so basic that even a newborn instinctively mastered it was now an unfamiliar, overwhelming hurdle. Ashbourne simply placed his palm on her head, transferring the necessary knowledge for her to perform the most basic tasks required to live. He had assumed she would have instinctively known how to breathe. After all, most of her hosts had been mortal and required air. But then again, she was the Phoenix Force, an entity beyond such trivial concerns. Why would she ever bother to retain such insignificant knowledge? Looks like it's hard for a god to play immortal. That's embarrassing, Ashbourne said, covering his mouth to suppress his laughter. The Phoenix Force shot him a glare, clearly annoyed. Determined to reclaim her dignity, she attempted to stand, only to immediately stumble, realizing she also needed to learn how to walk. Annoyed, she connected to the nearby humans, quickly copying the knowledge they had accumulated over a lifetime. The next moment, she stood effortlessly, adjusting with ease. However, she frowned as she noticed the state of the dress she had created for herself. It was wrinkled and unkempt, something she clearly found distasteful. You mortals are born so weak that even surviving is a struggle, she muttered, irritation lacing her tone. With a careless step forward, her clothing became as clean as new. Not everyone is lucky enough to be born with the power to reshape existence, Ashbourne replied, walking beside her. Then again, that kind of power comes with chains. Maybe it's an equal trade-off. The two strolled through the bustling streets, yet not a single human seemed to acknowledge their presence. Even though no one could sense them, the people instinctively moved aside, parting like water around them, allowing them to walk undisturbed. How long until we return home? I sensed that system of yours when I fused with you. I didn't realize who was behind you until then. The Phoenix Force spoke lightly. Who? Ashbourne asked, frowning in confusion. The one above all, she said with a sigh. The answer was so simple. Of course, the tribunal couldn't judge you, because you were acting under the will of the creator of all things. Ashbourne stood there, stunned. So, that old man I met, was him? He asked, still trying to process the revelation. She nodded. He takes many forms. A random homeless man on the street could just as easily be him, she said with a deep sigh. So, now that you've grasped the death of this world, how long until we can return to our own? The system said it's charging, and once it's ready, we can go back, Ashbourne replied, stretching his arms. Until then, I want to relax, and find my gear first. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't curious to see what would happen if someone else equipped it. Then we should find a nice place to call home for the time being. We should also get IDs and everything else. We might as well go all out playing mortal, she said, to which Ashbourne paused for a moment. But you need a name. Ren, Hannah, Ember. That's the best my naming skills can offer, he said lightly. I will be known as Ember Fireheart, she decided. I think it fits me well. Ember can mean spark, and I'm essentially the heart of our world. So, I'm the spark of creation and its heart. Ashbourne raised a brow, wondering if he should start putting that much thought into naming things. Shadow Lifegiver. I control shadows and give them life, Ashbourne said, looking at her for approval. Ashbourne will do, she replied with disdain, unimpressed by his naming skills. She had seen enough of his attempts to know better than to let him try again. Ignoring him, she turned her attention to the world around them, her curiosity piqued. This place was filled with unique forces, unlike anything found in their own world, and she was eager to explore. Chapter 42 Inches What's Wrong? Batman's voice cut through the hushed tension in the watchtower. His sharp gaze moved over the gathered magic users, their unease evident. We sensed an overwhelming darkness, Dr. Fate said, golden energy swirling around his hands as he wove a spell, searching for traces of the anomaly. A presence unlike anything we've encountered before, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. I tried to look into it, Zatara added, his voice uncharacteristically shaken. And something looked back. He swallowed, running a hand over his forehead, wiping away the cold sweat. Billions of eyes. Each one belonged to a being powerful enough to snuff out our entire universe with a mere thought. He hesitated as if saying the next part aloud might summon it back. But the strongest presence among them, it was beyond anything I could comprehend. I fear even the true forms of the gods would bow before it. Where is the person Superman brought in a few days ago? Batman asked, his tone sharp as his gaze swept over Shazam and the others. We were just about to report, Green Lantern Hal Jordan said, his frown deepening. He teleported away using some kind of dark energy, he's most likely the presence they sensed. Batman didn't waste another second listening. Without a word, he turned on his heel and strode toward the nearest console, pulling up surveillance footage from the room where Ashbourne had been. His fingers moved swiftly across the interface, fast-forwarding through the recordings until the screen played back everything that had transpired. His jaw tightened as he watched. His eyes narrowed. Then, without hesitation, he turned his attention toward Earth. He's either still on our Earth or has moved to another one. Everyone needs to work together to find him, Batman ordered before swiftly teleporting back to Earth. Without wasting a moment, he began scanning Gotham, his city, searching for any trace of Ashbourne. I've never been to California, but I'm pretty sure there wasn't a city called Jump City, Ember remarked, arms crossed as she observed the unfamiliar skyline. Ashbourne stood beside her, taking in the city that didn't exist in either Marvel or his previous life. Should have gone to New York, right? I just did a random teleportation, he mused. She nodded, giving him a knowing look. Sighing, Ashbourne was about to open a portal when something caught his eye. An explosion erupting in the distance, flames licking the sky as the sounds of chaos filled the air. This is new, the fearsome five, robbing a bank. A green cheetah-like figure called out, sprinting toward a man with a single, glowing eye and four others without hesitation. The one-eyed man fired a devastating energy beam, slicing through nearby cars like they were paper. Raven, they're all yours. The green cheetah shouted to the gothic-clad girl hovering ahead. But Raven wasn't paying attention. Her mind was elsewhere, drawn to something far more disturbing, the overwhelming darkness she had sensed just appearing within the city a moment ago. She had always believed her own power was something formidable, something to be feared. But compared to whatever she had just felt, her darkness was nothing. Boom. Her momentary distraction cost her. A sudden blast struck her midair, sending her crashing to the ground. Seizing the opportunity, the fearsome five wasted no time, disappearing into the chaos before anyone could stop them. I told you luck was on our side. A girl named Jinx laughed as the fearsome five disappeared, teleporting away in a flash. Beast Boy shifted back into his human form and hurried to check on Raven. To his relief, she was okay. She pushed herself up, brushing off the dust, and muttered an apology to him and the rest of the Teen Titans. But before she could explain what had happened, her head suddenly snapped toward a distant point, where Ashbourne stood. Meanwhile, Ashbourne stood unfazed, deep in thought. Now that I think about it, we need IDs, money, and a few other things, he mused aloud. With that, he stepped into his own shadow, which swirled in front of him, forming a portal straight to New York. We could just mind control people to give it to us, Ember suggested nonchalantly, leaving Ashbourne momentarily speechless. Before he could respond, the two vanished into the swirling darkness of the portal. Just as it was sealed shut, Raven appeared in the sky, her gaze locking onto the shadow portal disappearing. A deep unease settled over her. Meanwhile, Ember spoke again in New York. By the way, you do realize someone manipulated probability to make sure you ended up in Jump City. Ashbourne raised an eyebrow at that. Ha, didn't even notice, he said with a shrug. Guess they were too weak to register. After all, his teleportation had been completely random, whoever had interfered was barely worth his attention. Let's find a rich villain or something. Lex Luthor would do. I'm sure he'd be willing to part with a few $1 billion, for the right price, Ashbourne said casually. Ember tilted her head, tapping into her cosmic awareness to pull up everything she could about Luthor. And what exactly are you planning to sell to that foolish human? She asked, intrigued. Ashbourne smirked. Good question. How about hair? Ember stared at him, caught between amusement and exasperation. That reminds me, when we get back to our world, I want to sacrifice my eyes in exchange for wisdom. And I also want to hang myself on Yggdrasil to further boost my powers, Ashbourne said with a grin. He had planned to do it after dealing with the Void, but then he'd ended up in this new world. Ember raised an eyebrow, her expression unreadable. Why stop there? If you sacrifice your entire body in exchange for wisdom, you'll gain insight beyond comprehension. And if you don't just hang yourself from Yggdrasil, but let its roots pierce into you, you could obtain the purest form of rune magic. That would at least put you on equal footing with the true form of Null. She said it lazily as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Ashbourne blinked. Wow, you really just said that like it was nothing. He chuckled, shaking his head. But still, his plans were set. Why Gotham? Ember asked blankly as she surveyed the dark, foreboding city they had found themselves in. Ashbourne smirked. Well, this city practically calls to me. It's the perfect place for someone like me. Even in broad daylight, Gotham felt shrouded in eternal twilight, the shadows stretching unnaturally long as if resisting the presence of the sun. It was a city that seemed to thrive in darkness, and Ashbourne found that oddly fitting. Next chapter. Ashbourne vs. the Dark Phoenix chapter 43 inches in a way, Ember mused, glancing around. This world is more peaceful than the Earth we left behind. Yeah, our world has all the action packed into New York. It's like every villain there only has eyes for that city, which is pretty stupid if you ask me, Ashbourne said casually. Let's make a plan for what we're doing here. The first thing is, Ember suddenly stumbled, her stomach letting out a loud growl. A wave of weakness washed over her, and she nearly lost her balance. Ashbourne raised an eyebrow. You're hungry. Without hesitation, he held out his palm, and after a second, a bag emerged from his shadow. What do you want to eat? Ashbourne asked, watching as Ember eyed the bag with curiosity. She paused for a moment before answering, I always wanted to try those burgers. Ashbourne nodded, pouring his energy into the bag before pulling out a freshly made burger, still warm as if it had just been cooked. Ember took it, inspecting it for a second before taking a bite. She had seen Ashbourne eat these before, and now that she had the chance, she couldn't help but wonder, what was so special about them? Ember closed her eyes, letting her newly acquired sense of taste fully process the flavors. Her taste buds broke down each ingredient, analyzing the textures and combinations that made up the burger. But the moment she understood what she was eating, she spat it out, her expression twisting in pure disgust and outrage. You dare feed me bugs? She snapped, her fiery eyes burning with indignation. Ashbourne blinked, momentarily confused, before realizing what she meant. Pretty much every food humans eat has some form of bugs in them, he said with a casual shrug. It's best not to think about it. Ember's face darkened in horror as she immediately used her comic awareness to fact-check his claim. The more she saw, the more appalled she became. Plus, you're like part chicken, right? Don't you eat worms or something? Ashbourne teased, a smirk playing on his lips. The remains of the burger in Ember's hands instantly crumbled to dust. Flames erupted around her body, her golden eyes blazing with fury as she glared at him. Call me a chicken one more time. I am the Phoenix Force, she snapped, her voice filled with righteous indignation. Oh, is this the dark phoenix I'm facing? Ashbourne mused, tilting his head mockingly. How did you get corrupted by a few insects? With that, Ember's flames surged violently, the air around them warping from the heat. I knew it, Ashbourne said, completely unfazed by her rage. Instead of being concerned, he observed her closely, noting the subtle shifts in her energy. As he suspected, she had grown stronger. She had tapped into the forces of this new omniverse, using them to enhance her power. The realization only fueled Ember's fury. It wasn't just that Ashbourne had provoked her, it was why. He had deliberately enraged her just to test her strength, treating her like an experiment rather than an equal. And on top of that, she was still starving. Her patience snapped. Without hesitation, she lunged forward, determined to put Ashbourne in his place. Here. Just as Ember moved to strike, she hesitated, her eyes narrowing as Ashbourne casually pulled a golden red apple from his bag and held it out to her. She paused, eyeing him suspiciously before snatching it from his hand. Taking a cautious bite, her rage evaporated instantly, replaced by wide-eyed amazement. The apple's flavor was unlike anything she had ever tasted, a perfect fusion of sweetness and spice that sent a pleasant shiver down her spine. Wait. You can create entirely new kinds of food? She asked, staring at the bag in disbelief. A moment ago, she had been ready to burn Ashbourne to ash, but now, her curiosity had completely overtaken her anger. I guess so. Makes me wonder what I could create if I put in enough energy to rival a city, Ashbourne mused. Testing the thought, he poured an immense amount of power into the bag, the equivalent of a city's energy, while picturing chocolate. A moment later, he reached in and pulled out a chocolate bar. Snapping it in half, he handed a piece to Ember, who took it with hesitant intrigue. Ember took a bite of the chocolate, and the moment it touched her tongue, she froze. Her pupils shrank, and in an instant, her entire life flashed before her eyes. She stood motionless for so long that Ashbourne, mid-motion about to take his own bite, lowered the chocolate and raised an eyebrow. Are you all right? He asked, watching her carefully. Her eyes flickered slightly as she returned to reality, locking onto Ashbourne. For a brief moment, she just stared at him in silence, processing what had just happened. Then, with sudden and terrifying intensity, she whispered a single word. Chocolate. Before Ashbourne could react, she roared, chocolate. And with a single punch, sent him rocketing across the city. Without hesitation, she snatched the untouched piece from his hands and devoured it like a starving nomad discovering an oasis. Each bite was consumed with reckless abandon, her previous composure completely shattered. More. Chocolate. 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 Ember's voice boomed as flames erupted from her body, shaking the entire multiverse. Her once fiery red hair darkened, her aura twisting and warping under the sheer force of her hunger. This was no longer just the Phoenix Force, this was the Dark Phoenix unleashed. All this, over stupid chocolate. Ashbourne muttered weakly, coughing up a mouthful of blood. His vision blurred as he slowly glanced down at the gaping hole in his stomach. Shadows slithered around him, instinctively moving to repair the damage, but even they seemed sluggish under the oppressive energy Ember was releasing. No. This cursed city had something to do with it, he muttered, his mind racing as he tried to make sense of the madness unfolding before him. That one attack would have one-shotted me if I wasn't immortal, Warper. All sight. Why are you guys just standing around? Ashbourne called out, his gaze darting to his shadows. By now, they shouldn't have needed his command to act, so why weren't they moving? All shadow soldiers were erased during the battle with the storm. Due to the host acquiring the skill Undying Shadows, and the host's current injuries, all shadow soldiers are locked away until the host fully recovers, the system informed him. Ashbourne clicked his tongue in frustration, but he didn't have time to dwell on it. In the blink of an eye, he leapt back, just in time to dodge Ember's grasping hand as it closed around empty air where his neck had been a heartbeat ago. No gear, I'm in a weakened state, and I have no shadow soldiers, his lips curled into a smirk. Well, let's dance. Without hesitation, he shot into the sky, moving at a speed that tore through the air like a sonic boom. As he ascended, he tightened his grip on the bag in his hand, his last bargaining chip. Ember's burning gaze followed the bag, her obsession overriding all reason. With a furious roar, she rocketed after him, flames exploding from her body as she tore through the atmosphere in pursuit. Arise! Ashbourne's voice echoed through the entire city, resonating with a power that shook the very foundation of Gotham. In that instant, his mortal guise vanished, replaced by a divine form so overwhelming that it could charm even the coldest of hearts. Across every graveyard, from the bodies of humans to the smallest insects, even the creatures lurking beneath the waters, they all stirred, rising from death itself. The entire city was now under his shadow. Just as Ember's outstretched hand nearly reached him, Ashbourne switched places with one of his newly summoned shadows. Ember's fiery fist crashed into something, but it wasn't Ashbourne. A shadow, more specifically, the shadow of an ant. Ember's eyes widened in disbelief as the tiny creature, an insignificant insect in life, effortlessly caught her punch. The force of her attack should have shattered mountains, yet the ant remained unmoving, gripping her hand with absolute authority. Just because I might be weak right now, Ashbourne's voice drifted through the air, soft and composed, yet carrying an undeniable weight. Ember turned her gaze to a nearby rooftop. There he stood, hands casually tucked into his pockets, his expression unreadable. Doesn't mean my shadows are. Chapter 44. As soon as the shadows rose, they surged with power. Even in his weakened state, Ashbourne's mastery over the Shadow Monarch force ensured that his shadows would stand far above his current strength. Though these newly summoned shadows had yet to bask in his darkness and fully evolve, the sheer depth of his control alone propelled them to unfathomable heights, light years beyond Ashbourne's present condition. But the Phoenix Force, it was the nexus of all psionic energy, a power that transcended mere strength and bordered on the divine. In the DC universe, another force held sway over reality, the emotional electromagnetic spectrum. What was that, you ask? The emotional spectrum was an omnipresent energy field, fueled by the raw emotions of all sentient beings across existence, one of the 7 fundamental forces of this universe. It was the very foundation of power for the Lantern Corps, each color representing a distinct force of will, fear, rage, love, and beyond. So, the real question was, what would happen if the Phoenix Force, the cosmic fire of rebirth and destruction, absorbed not just the emotional spectrum of this universe, but of the entire omniverse? The thought alone was terrifying, but she was doing just that, aiming to be the nexus of the emotional spectrum. Ember's mortal form began to deteriorate, her flesh melting away to reveal a body of pure, raging fire. But before she could fully shed her human shell, Ashbourne acted. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed a chocolate bar into the sky. Like an addict drawn to their vice, the Phoenix Force halted its self-destruction, instinctively healing its mortal body as it rocketed forward, snatching the chocolate from the air. But she never got the chance to taste it. In an instant, Ashbourne appeared behind her, his grip tightening around her throat. Before she could react, he hurled her down, sending her crashing into the earth with a force that shook the city. Even as she hit the ground, Ashbourne didn't hesitate. He reached out, his power surging as he absorbed the corruption that had overwhelmed her. Ember's flames exploded outward, instinctively fighting back against Ashbourne's grasp. The heat was immense, scorching everything in its path, but Ashbourne didn't flinch. Her fire burned him, searing his skin, but he ignored the pain. His eyes locked onto hers as the Phoenix Force slowly regained its reason. Bit by bit, the madness faded. And then, in an instant, the flames vanished. Ashbourne let out a deep sigh, stepping back as his wounds were consumed by darkness, healing as if they had never existed. With a flick of his fingers, shadows wrapped around Ember, ensuring her modesty before disappearing, leaving her fully clothed once more. Sorry, Ember muttered, unsure of what to do after what had just happened. Ashbourne let out a tired sigh, stretching his neck as he considered what to do with her. This city is pretty cursed. So maybe we should stay here for a while, he said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. Might help you toughen up that weak mind of yours. That was pretty embarrassing. Ember's face flushed red with humiliation. Remembering how she had gone feral over chocolate made her want to disappear into the void. Luckily, you were stupid. This was the first time one of my plans actually worked, Ashbourne said with a grin, crossing his arms. I brought back every lifeless body in the city and had a single ant block your attack, just to give you the illusion that all of my shadows were insanely overpowered. In reality, they were only planetary level at best. He smirked, clearly pleased with himself. With sheer numbers and that one ant's strength, you assumed you had to go all out. But mid-transformation, you completely threw logic out the window and lunged at a chocolate bar instead, while your body nearly burned itself away from the backlash. That's the first time a plan of yours actually worked. Good for you, Ember said with a downcast look. She knew Ashbourne was terrible at making plans. His intelligence stats seemed more focused on strengthening his mind and learning capabilities rather than strategic thinking. And now, that fact stung even more, another blow to her pride. Don't be so down, Ashbourne said with a light smile, lowering his overwhelming charm once more. This city is the perfect place for you to train. No one is perfect, and your only flaw is that you've allowed yourself to feel human emotions without knowing how to control them. He extended a hand toward her, and after a moment's hesitation, Ember took it. So, let's start training, Ashbourne said, stretching slightly before his gaze shifted upward. But first, we should deal with our guests. Ember followed his gaze, her expression hardening as she took in the sight above them. The sky was filled with figures, dozens of them, their silhouettes stark against the daylight. The Justice League had arrived. Their presence carried weight, an unspoken challenge that hung heavy in the air. I wonder if they recorded all of that, Ashbourne mused, a smirk playing at his lips. Ember shot him a death glare but didn't bother wasting her energy on a response. Instead, she turned her attention to the figures above, feeling out their power. Most of them weren't a concern, but one stood out. The embodiment of hope, Superman. His strength wasn't static, it fluctuated depending on what he faced, adapting to the challenges before him. In a way, he was the keystone of this omniverse, a central figure in its story. And Ember could sense it. Marvel had its share of beings who could manipulate the plot, but this was different. This was the universe itself favoring its champion. What? Before Ember could finish her sentence, Ashbourne swiftly covered her mouth, already sensing she was about to say something rude. Her response was immediate, she bit down on his hand. Ah, damn it, Ashbourne hissed, shaking his hand as a sharp sting shot through it. Instinct nearly had him swinging a punch at her, but Ember dodged effortlessly, floating just out of reach with a smug look. Last I checked, chickens didn't have teeth, Ashbourne muttered, flexing his fingers. Flames erupted around Ember in response, her glare searing hotter than her fire. But Ashbourne simply turned away, dismissing her anger entirely, something that, of course, only infuriated her more. So, what does the Justice League want with us? Ashbourne asked with a light smile, casually sizing up the heroes hovering above them. Hal Jordan narrowed his eyes, his green aura flaring slightly as he flew closer. Who was she, and how was she able to interfere with the emotional spectrum? He demanded, his voice carrying an edge of wariness. What did you do? I don't want omniversal-level beings knocking on my door, Ashbourne said with a frown, his arms crossing as he eyed Ember. She sneered, flipping her hair back with a haughty smirk. I'll just burn them to ash, she said arrogantly, as if the idea of facing such beings was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. With every moment, she was growing stronger. Soon, she would become the true nexus of all psionic energy in this omniverse. Says the chicken who just got corrupted over chocolate, Ashbourne said with clear disdain. That was it. Ember snapped. Chapter 45 inches says the chicken who just got corrupted over chocolate, Ashbourne said with clear disdain. That was it. Ember snapped. She vanished in a flash of fire, her fist rocketing toward Ashbourne's face. But just before impact, his shadow surged from the ground, forming a barrier between them. The force of her attack was swallowed whole, vanishing into the infinite darkness as if it had never existed. Ember's eyes widened in shock. She tried to yank her hand back, but the shadow moved, wrapping around her like living tendrils. The darkness coiled around her limbs, pulling her in. Instinct screamed at her to fight, but after a second, she stopped resisting. She had realized something. So, instead of struggling, she allowed herself to sink into Ashbourne's shadow, disappearing without a trace. The Justice League, however, wasn't about to stand by and let something so ominous unfold before their eyes. Without hesitation, the Justice League surged forward to intervene, determined to save Ember from whatever darkness had just consumed her. But before they could reach her, a golden light flashed, and Dr. Fate appeared in their path, raising a hand to halt them. "He's absorbing the corruption he missed," Fate stated calmly, his voice carrying an authority that made even the most headstrong heroes pause. "If you interfere now, you'll disrupt the process. More importantly, you're also weakening her connection to the emotional spectrum. If she experiences too many uncontrolled emotions, she could easily fall back into that dark, destructive state." Ashbourne gave a slight nod of acknowledgement, though his attention remained on the process at hand. "Pretty much," Ashbourne said with a shrug. "Emotions are still new to her, so it's best to start off with training wheels." His gaze swept over the gathered heroes before he tilted his head slightly. "So, what do you guys want?" Batman stepped forward, his expression unreadable beneath the cowl, but his voice was firm. "You are an unknown, highly powerful being walking the earth with control over darkness. We can't ignore your existence when it could pose a threat to everyone." Ashbourne sighed, rubbing the back of his head. "Don't worry, I'm a reasonable man. I just plan to relax here on Earth until I recover my full strength. Then I'll leave your omniverse and return to mine." His tone was casual, as if this entire situation was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "I'm afraid we can't just take your word for it," Superman interjected, his voice firm but not hostile. "You may not have ill intentions, but your power alone makes you a concern. And the girl in your shadow, she lost control and destroyed an entire city block without even meaning to. We need to ensure she's safe to walk among the people here." "I understand where you're coming from," Ashbourne said with a sigh while turning to leave. "But I just don't want to. I spent months in a universe overrun with zombies, only to step out and fight the pawn of the ruler of the primordial void. Then I had to take on the void's ruler himself, survive an attempted assassination by its will, and watch it clash with the embodiment of the laws of my omniverse. And after all that, I somehow ended up here." He stretched his arms lazily. "So, forgive me if my top priority right now is relaxing, and staying far away from all of you is step one." With that, he turned on his heel, waving a dismissive hand over his shoulder. "I'm going to get an ID. See you guys never. We can help you settle on Earth. Just answer a few questions, and you'll have everything you need by tomorrow," Batman said. Ashbourne paused for a long moment before replying. "Okay. 5 questions." Batman hesitated briefly before asking, "When you awakened, our magic casters sensed numerous powerful eyes within your darkness. Are they connected to how you reanimated lifeless bodies across Gotham as shadows?" Ashbourne gave a slight nod. "Are they under your complete and absolute control?" Batman asked. Ashbourne paused for a moment before answering. "Yes, but they have free will." Batman's eyes narrowed. "Who is that girl in your shadow?" "Ember," Ashbourne replied calmly. "I can't go into more detail. I have no interest in attracting the attention of some omniversal being here. A phoenix with a unique connection to the emotional spectrum, so powerful that if her existence were known to the right beings, they would come looking for her." Batman pieced the information together. Ashbourne had called her a chicken, and she'd been offended. That alone made it obvious. She was a phoenix. "Are you being corrupted by the corruption you absorb?" Batman asked. Ashbourne simply shook his head. "Nope. I was told my soul is far too clean for someone who bathes in darkness. I guess that's a good thing," Ashbourne said lightly. Batman glanced at the magic casters nearby, and they all gave a confirming nod. Ashbourne was telling the truth. "I'll save my last question," Batman said before stepping into the darkness and vanishing. Well, it would have been cool if Ashbourne couldn't see him perfectly, even in the shadows. "I'm willing to pay for a nice mansion, immortality, bringing the dead back to life, whatever you want. Name it, and I can make it happen." I was going to go to Lex, but you'll do, considering how rich you are, Ashbourne called out, making Batman pause and turn back to him. You'd work with Lex? Batman asked, frowning. Sorry, but the whole hero and villain concept doesn't interest me. Think of me as a neutral party, someone who acts only by his own rules. Ashbourne smirked. Oh, and that was your fifth question. Batman's eyes narrowed. A mansion is only worth a few million, nothing too extravagant. That's about equal to what, exactly? Ashbourne mused, tapping his fingers against his arm as he searched for something of equivalent value. He peered into his shadow, sifting through countless items like a merchant digging through a bottomless bag. After a few moments, his eyes lit up, and with a smirk, he reached in and pulled out a worn but undeniably advanced suit of armor. This, he said, holding it up with a slight flourish, is the Model 2. It used to belong to a genius, until he turned into a zombie, anyway. It's a bit banged up, but come on, tech from another world's top mind has to be worth more than just a few million. He gave the suit a solid slap, the metal ringing dully under his hand. This thing can obliterate tanks, outspeed missiles, and do a whole lot more. With a bit of tinkering, I'd say it could take your capabilities to the next level. You have better ones? Batman asked, stepping out of the shadows for a closer look at the armor. His eyes flicked toward Cyborg, who was already trying to scan it, before shifting back to Ashbourne. Yes, sir, Ashbourne replied smoothly. I've got Model 3, Model 4, all the way up to Model 37. He let the words hang for a moment before continuing. Now, Model 37, that one's a little too good. It's called the Bleeding Edge armor. With a casual wave of his hand, he brought out all of the armor, but the one almost everyone looked at was the sleek, advanced suit, its metallic surface shifting with an almost liquid fluidity. This beauty has more than enough power to wipe out a planet, Ashbourne said, his tone almost playful. Best of all, it's made of nanotech. It can rest under your skin, just a thought away from activation. He grinned. The going price? A modest $9.2 trillion. What about this one? Batman asked, his gaze settling on the massive Hulkbuster armor. Chapter 46 inches. What about this one? Batman asked, his gaze settling on the massive Hulkbuster armor. Ashbourne smirked. Sharp eyes. In my omniverse, there's someone called the Hulk, a powerful hero who only gets stronger the angrier he becomes. As you can imagine, that kind of power can get out of control. He gestured toward the towering suit of armor. This is the Hulkbuster. But not just any Hulkbuster, this one wasn't built to fight just any Hulk. The average Hulk is already planetary level in strength, but this was designed to take on World War Hulk. A version of him so powerful that his very footsteps could shatter the earth. Ashbourne slapped the armor with a metallic clang. The price for this big guy? A cool $800 trillion. 800 trillion. The sheer number sent a ripple of shock through everyone present. Ashbourne simply nodded, completely unfazed. I mean, World War Hulk went toe-to-toe with Thor while he had the Odin Force. At that point, Thor was already beyond universal in power, Ashbourne mused. So yeah, this armor could easily destroy the universe if you're not careful. He paused, tilting his head in thought. But how would a punch destroy the universe? Oh right. Hulk did crack reality with a punch that one time. He chuckled, recalling the absurdity of that comic moment. The thought lingered in his mind. If a normal Hulk could do that, could he? Meanwhile, through the telepathic link Martian Manhunter had established, Cyborg's voice reached Batman's mind. Batman, there's a force field around the armors. Every time I try to scan them, my system just keeps pulling up my search history. He's toying with me. Batman's eyes flicked toward Cyborg for a brief moment before shifting back to the Model 2 armor, his expression unreadable as he processed the information. Where's Model 1? Batman asked. Ashbourne smirked. Sharp eyes. You see, the man who built this armor put together Model 1 in a cave, using scrap. He let the words hang for a moment before continuing. And yet, despite that, it's not too far behind Model 2. The guy was a genius. Makes me wonder if you'd be able to live up to his skills while using the armor he threw away, since, you know, you can't afford the better ones. Batman's eye twitched slightly. Oh, but if you're not interested in the armor, Ashbourne added, holding up a small metallic piece. I also have vibranium. Go ahead, shoot at it. Cyborg, still irritated by Ashbourne's earlier trick, narrowed his eyes. Without hesitation, his arm shifted into an energy cannon, and he fired a blast at the metal in Ashbourne's palm. Everyone watched in shock as the vibranium effortlessly absorbed the kinetic energy of the attack, the blast vanishing as if it had never existed. The piece of metal remained untouched, completely unfazed. This here is vibranium, Ashbourne said with a smirk, holding up the metallic piece. It can absorb, store, and release massive amounts of kinetic energy. Back in my world, it was only the fourth strongest metal. My armor, on the other hand, is forged from a mix of every ore my omniverse had to offer, he coughed. Anyway, I'm selling this for 10 million per gram. Flash blinked. Isn't that a bit too expensive? Is it? Ashbourne tilted his head. Isn't red diamond worth somewhere between $1 to $12 million per gram? I thought I was being nice, especially considering this can cut through even Superman. That last statement made everyone's eyebrows rise. Their gazes instinctively flicked toward Superman, then drifted toward the stripper. I mean Wonder Woman, whose tiara had also been known to slice through Kryptonian flesh. You're saying this vibranium is as strong as Amazonium? Wonder Woman asked, intrigued. Ashbourne shook his head. Amazonium is only as powerful as it is because of magic. Vibranium, on the other hand, is this strong without magic. He paused for effect before continuing, and more importantly, vibranium can be combined with other ores to create what was once considered the strongest metal in existence, though now, it's only the third strongest. To emphasize his point, Ashbourne casually pulled out Captain America's shield, the iconic red, white, and blue reflecting under the light. This shield can withstand just about anything, Ashbourne said, turning it over in his hands. To destroy it, you'd need to be Skyfather level or higher, in other words, above multiversal. His eyes flicked around. Since this omniverse works differently from mine, I'll put it simply. Nothing in this multiverse can destroy this shield. Maybe if it comes from the fourth dimension or higher it might. To demonstrate, he casually tossed the shield toward a wall. Everyone watched as it ricocheted off multiple surfaces with precise, physics-defying accuracy before flying straight back into Ashbourne's hand. This here is the third most durable metal in my omniverse, he continued, spinning the shield between his fingers. So, $40 quintillion, or something of equal value. Any takers? He scanned the room, waiting to see if anyone dared to make an offer. How powerful is his armor? Batman wondered. If Ashbourne's armor was ranked number 1 in his omniverse, and he believed that nothing in this multiverse could destroy the shield which was ranked 3rd in his omniverse, then just what was his armor capable of? I'll take 10 grams of vibranium and this armor, Batman said, his voice steady. I'll have the money delivered to you by tomorrow. Without hesitation, Ashbourne retrieved 10 grams of vibranium and handed over the Model 2 armor, allowing Batman to walk away with his purchase. Wonder Woman watched him leave before turning back to Ashbourne, raising an eyebrow. You're not afraid he won't pay you back? If he doesn't pay me back, I'll just kill him and take my stuff back, Ashbourne said with a light smile, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The group tensed. Eyes narrowed at him, not in fear, but in sharp scrutiny. The casual way he spoke about taking a life didn't sit well with most of them. In your omniverse, do the heroes kill? Flash asked, his tone cautious. Ashbourne tilted his head in thought for a moment before answering. Many follow a no-kill rule, but when they have to, they will. In fact, a lot of them wouldn't hesitate to eliminate villains deemed too dangerous for humanity. He glanced toward Batman. So yeah, the Joker. He would have been dead a long time ago, mental illness or not. His gaze swept across the room, reading their reactions. Some heroes even end up killing innocents, not because they want to, but because their powers are uncontrollable. He shrugged. In a way, my omniverse is stronger than yours. It's willing to make the hard calls instead of letting the fear of crossing that line dictate everything. They don't let the idea that killing once makes it easier to kill again control them. He said it all so lightly, but the weight of his words settled heavily in the air. Ashbourne recalled a comic where Wolverine had killed a young mutant who had just awakened his powers. The kid hadn't even had a chance to understand what was happening to him. Before ending his life, Wolverine had shared a drink with him, One last moment of humanity before delivering the inevitable. Marvel had its fair share of heroes with a no-kill rule, but it also had plenty who wouldn't think twice about pulling the trigger. Deadpool, Punisher, Ghost Rider, Wolverine, Moon Knight. His thoughts suddenly halted. Wait. His shadows contained countless warriors, monsters, and legends, but one name was missing. Ghost Rider. The heroes remained silent, their expressions darkened by Ashbourne's words. They all knew the truth. Killing was the easier way. If they executed someone like the Joker, countless lives would be spared, and Gotham would undoubtedly be safer. But once they crossed that line, wouldn't it be easier the second time? And the third? Until eventually, they weren't heroes anymore. They were tyrants, deciding who lived and who died. No matter how much sense Ashbourne's world made, they refused to believe that true heroes killed. There was always another way, no matter how difficult it seemed. Breaking the silence, Ashbourne smiled. So, where am I sleeping? It'd be rude to let your guest spend the night on the streets. Chapter 47 inches. So, what was the whole chocolate thing about? Back at the Watchtower, Green Lantern, Superman, Wonder Woman, Flash, and Martian Manhunter observed Ashbourne as he tapped away at a computer, sifting through the vast expanse of the World Wide Web in search of anything useful. With Ashbourne staying the night at the Watchtower, the Justice League's heavy hitters had decided to remain as well, just in case. I have this bag that can create food based on whatever I picture, as long as I pour enough energy into it, Ashbourne said lazily, his fingers tapping away at the keyboard. I made a chocolate bar and infused it with the energy equivalent to an entire city. So, it ended up as some godly tier chocolate that overloaded her pleasure senses or whatever, and she went crazy. His search continued. He scoured the internet for important things: One Piece, Naruto, Dragon Ball, only to be met with disappointment. They didn't exist here. Flash suddenly appeared at his side. What are you looking for? Anime. Ashbourne sighed, rubbing his chin. But this omniverse doesn't have it. He paused, his mind working through a realization. Though, if what I think I know about infinity is true, that means somewhere out there in the multiverse, the anime I want does exist. Are we just gonna ignore the fact that he has a bag that can create godly food? Green Lantern asked, baffled that no one seemed particularly concerned about this. The green guy has a point, Ashbourne said, turning away from the computer. 5 minds are better than one. So, how about you all come up with some crazy ideas? I wanna see just how ridiculous the stuff I can create. With a casual motion, he reached into his shadow and pulled out the bag. Flash shrugged. Alright. How about pizza that tastes amazing but also helps you lose weight? Ashbourne gave him an approving nod as that was a smart idea. Without hesitation, he reached into the bag, focused for a moment, and then pulled out a pizza box, placing it on the table in front of them. No way, Hal muttered in shock. His ring had scanned the pizza, and sure enough, it was exactly what Flash had asked for. A delicious, weight loss-inducing masterpiece. The room fell into stunned silence before chaos erupted. One by one, wild food ideas were tossed around, ranging from the bizarre to the outright ridiculous. Even concepts beyond food, like potions that granted temporary buffs, were suggested, just to see if the bag had any limits. As the excitement settled for a moment, Ashbourne leaned back and asked casually, how long have you guys even been part of the Justice League? Oh, we came together about a year ago when Darkseid attacked, Flash answered. After that, we started bringing in new members until we got to where we are today. Ashbourne nodded in understanding, filing away that piece of information. So, you guys haven't faced beings like Doomsday? Ashbourne asked. The group exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. The name didn't seem to ring a bell for any of them. That caught Ashbourne off guard. Did Darkseid himself attack? He asked, narrowing his eyes. They shook their heads. No, just his army, Superman answered. We managed to push them back before he could arrive. Superman suddenly frowned. Wait. I thought you didn't know about this world. His gaze locked onto Ashbourne, suspicion creeping into his voice. That's a secret, Ashbourne said casually. By the way, is Cyborg part of the Justice League or the Teen Titans? He's a temporary member of the Justice League. He's not old enough to join officially, Flash explained. The conversation continued, with Ashbourne learning more about the League. They were still relatively new, but over the past year, they had gathered heroes from all over the world. They had faced many dangerous threats, but nothing they couldn't handle. For now, Earth had been at peace. So when Ashbourne suddenly appeared, they were all quick to react. So, do you have a girlfriend or something back home? Flash asked, breaking the silence. With things getting dull, his curiosity got the better of him. Nope, Ashbourne replied without hesitation. I was never the handsome type. He glanced at Superman. Especially with guys like him running around. Hard to compete when someone looks like God took extra care of them when they were in the oven. Sure, Ashbourne had a high charm stat, but as far as he could tell, it had zero effect on his looks. At best, it probably boosted his persuasion, social manipulation, and mental resistance. But his actual appearance, clearly beyond even the system's ability to improve. Otherwise, why weren't zombies baddies throwing themselves at him? Not that he wanted that, of course, he was just being honest. He was so ugly that even the undead didn't find him attractive, and he'd made peace with that. He liked to think he looked like Sung Jinwoo, but deep down, he knew that might just be wishful thinking. And that was fine. He wasn't here to win beauty contests, he was just grateful for everything he. Flash, Superman, and the rest of the group stared at Ashbourne with blank expressions. They had never seen someone so absurdly handsome talk about not being handsome before. Ashbourne wasn't just good looking, he was easily one of the most attractive people they had ever seen. And yet, here he was, claiming otherwise, even comparing himself to Superman. How was Superman supposed to feel about that? What? Ashbourne frowned, displeased by their looks. They were staring at him as if he were some hideous creature. If they wanted to test him, he'd fight them. Just because he'd made peace with his looks didn't mean he was about to take this disrespect lying down. And nothing, Flash stammered, struggling to find a response. He glanced around at the others, hoping for backup, but they all seemed just as awkward. I think you're handsome, Wonder Woman said casually. Ashbourne, who had just lifted a slice of pizza to his mouth, froze mid-bite. How exactly was he supposed to react when his childhood crush called him handsome? Sure, she was probably just saying it to cheer him up, but still. Before he could say anything, the room suddenly grew hot. Ashbourne's gaze slowly shifted toward his shadow. A hand emerged, fingers curling over the edge like a predator creeping into the light. Ember pulled herself free, her glowing eyes locking onto Wonder Woman almost instantly. Ember and Wonder Woman locked eyes, the tension in the room thick enough to cut with a blade. Meanwhile, Ashbourne stared at Ember, utterly speechless. Did she really hate him that much? Enough to react this strongly to someone giving him a half-assed compliment out of pity. For a moment, he genuinely didn't know how to respond. He had always thought he and Ember were close, like those friends who were constantly bickering but, deep down, were inseparable. But now, he wasn't so sure. Did Ember not see their relationship the same way? Were they actually friends, or what? She was just being nice. It's not like she even meant the compliment, Ashbourne said with a frown. Ember froze, her gaze snapping back to him. She opened her mouth to say something, but the displeasure in Ashbourne's eyes made her pause. He had completely misunderstood the situation. I wasn't trying to be nice. I state facts, Wonder Woman declared. Without warning, she drew her sword and pointed it straight at Ashbourne. Ashbourne blinked, stunned. Up until now, Wonder Woman had been mostly quiet, watching things unfold rather than getting involved. Now she had a blade to his face. For what? To force him into believing her. What kind of hero was this? And more importantly, how was crime even still a thing if she was out here handling things like this? Chapter 48. Thank you, Ashbourne said, though he wasn't entirely sure how to react. Apparently, the quiet ones weren't to be trusted, they had secret personalities just waiting to explode. I ask you out on a date, Wonder Woman declared. Ember's fists clenched, her glare intensifying. Ashbourne barely registered it, his mind was still catching up. A date. With Wonder Woman. Why on earth would he say no to that? Wonder Woman. Superman's voice was firm as he shot her a look. Wonder Woman hesitated, then blinked as if snapping back to reality. With a quiet sigh, she sheathed her sword and sat down, her gaze lowering to the floor. Ashbourne frowned, glancing around, trying to make sense of what had just happened. One second, she was holding him at sword point. The next, she was asking him out, and now she looked embarrassed. Before he could dwell on it, Ember grabbed his hand. "We should leave," she said, her tone sharp. Ashbourne didn't resist. He wasn't about to sit around and let this turn into some weird spectacle at his expense. And as you could see, he had incredible self-control, choosing to leave when the battle wasn't worth it. "We can find another place to stay," Ember said with a smirk, throwing a pointed look at Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman's fists clenched, but before she could react, Ember teleported away, taking Ashbourne with her. Destination unknown. Of course, the League immediately moved to track them. Meanwhile, Superman's gaze lingered on Wonder Woman. Why had he called out to her earlier? Because he had to remind her. Ashbourne wasn't fully trusted. It wasn't smart to get involved with someone who could very well become their enemy tomorrow. Wonder Woman understood that, but still. Ashbourne was just too handsome. If Superman were gay, he'd get it. But thanks to Ashbourne's charm being naturally suppressed, its strongest effect was on those already attracted to his gender. Hell, be around him long enough, and you might start questioning things yourself. From the moment Wonder Woman laid eyes on Ashbourne, she was shocked. His beauty was something even the goddess of beauty would envy. But at first, it was just that. She admired his looks, nothing more. That changed the moment he started talking. When Ashbourne spoke, everyone listened. His presence was impossible to ignore. Still, for the longest time, she had assumed he and Ember were a thing. That was, until Ashbourne casually mentioned that he had never been in a relationship, because he genuinely believed he was too ugly. And at that moment, she just couldn't help herself. Men and women weren't so different. How would a man react if she heard that a woman she liked had never been in a relationship because she thought she was ugly? He'd immediately try to shower her with compliments, reassuring her that she was beautiful. Wonder Woman had done the exact same thing. What she hadn't expected was Ember's reaction. But she didn't care. So what if she had a love rival? She was willing to fight for Ashbourne, give it everything she had. That was, until she remembered that Ashbourne might one day become their enemy. Still, it was impressive how quickly she managed to snap herself back to reality. "So, where do you plan for us to stay?" Ashbourne asked with a blank expression as he followed Ember. He couldn't help but notice that their destination looked familiar. Was that the White House? The gates swung open on their own, and the guards bowed slightly in greeting. It seemed Ember's mind control was in full effect. "I'm going to take the easy route," Ember replied, casting a peculiar glance at Ashbourne. "Also, shouldn't you start resting? You're bound to attract trouble." "What do you mean?" Ashbourne asked, genuinely confused. "You don't feel it?" Ember asked, her expression growing more serious. "The primordial void of this omniverse, slowly trying to pinpoint you within the light we're in." Ashbourne paused, then focused. The moment he did, his face paled. He felt it. An all-seeing eye scouring creation, searching for him. He quickly pulled his senses back, heart pounding. If he lingered for even a moment longer, it might help the darkness find him. New mission. Get ready objective. You destroyed the hero's plot armor by suddenly appearing. The darkness will come at the light with its full might. Prepare yourself. Reward. Extreme recovery punishment. You will not be ready to face it. Time limit. 10 years. Hint. You would need more than 1 billion years to fully recover your strength. It would be wise to gain allies within the light to combat the darkness. Once the system deems you minimally prepared, the quest will be marked as complete. Hint 2. The Justice League across the multiverse, and even higher dimensional beings, could be invaluable allies, shadow or not. Hint 3. You can ignore the mission, as in 1 year. You can return to Marvel. New mission. I'm now your leader objective. Convince the world's leaders, without using mind control, to make you the leader of the Justice League. Reward. Training dimension. Punishment. None. Fuck this shit. Ashbourne groaned internally. Can't I heal in peace? I thought this was supposed to be a vacation or something. Fuck. Fuck. His eyes lingered on the previous quest reward, extreme recovery. It looked too good to pass up. But did he really want to bother with this world? Well, the system is pointing me toward a way to survive. I guess it's time to charm my way into the world leaders' hearts. Sighing, he glanced at Ember. Remove the mind control on the president. She raised an eyebrow but did as he asked. What's going on? The dark-skinned man asked, standing up in alarm. His instincts kicked in immediately. Something was off. He turned, reaching to call for security, but before he could, the door swung open. He froze as Ashbourne and Ember stepped inside. "We mean you no harm," Ashbourne said calmly. "In fact, I'm here to show you a vision of the future." A future he had just glimpsed. One that didn't have to happen. Now, he intended to share that wisdom with the President of the United States. A vision of what? He asked, his voice wary. Before he could process an answer, the world around him shifted. He was no longer in his office. His breath caught as he looked around, disoriented, until his eyes landed on two hands reaching for each other. His heart paused. On instinct knew this scene. One hand radiated darkness. The other is light. The eternal struggle. Heroes and villains, locked in an endless cycle of good and evil. It was why no matter what happened, villains who should have died always returned, and why the same was true for heroes. The battles waged on Earth were nothing more than reflections of the greater war between the darkness and the light. But then, his heart skipped a few beats. The darkness was winning. Slowly, it swallowed the hand of light, creeping over it like an unstoppable tide. For a fleeting moment, he saw an illusion of the multiverse, of Superman, Wonder Woman, and every hero falling before their enemies. Some perished, others met fates far worse. And in the end, the light was gone. Snuffed out. Never to be seen again. The president collapsed into his seat, his body rigid with horror. He had just witnessed the end of creation itself. His gaze snapped to Ashbourne, who stood calmly beside him. Before he could even form a question, Ashbourne spoke. "As you saw, the battles here on Earth are merely reflections of the greater war taking place beyond." Ashbourne's voice was calm, steady. "If enough of these reflections show that we are winning, then it means the light is pushing back the darkness." The president's eyes went blank for a moment as the realization sank in. Then, slowly, he stood. Ashbourne met his gaze. "I want to lead the Justice League, because with my skill set, creation wins." The president hesitated, doubt flickering in his expression. "How can I trust anything you just showed me?" "Because what you're feeling right now is real," Ashbourne said, his voice steady. "We all originated from that light. You know that instinctively. I didn't have to tell you. Everything you saw, everything you felt, came from something deep inside you. Your core is shaking in fear because it knows the truth." The president had no response. Because it was true. At least, that's what he felt. Ashbourne took a step closer. "I could warp reality. I could force my way into leading the Justice League. But that would go against my goal, to save existence, not dominate it." He extended his hand. "Put your faith in me." The president hesitated for only a second before gripping Ashbourne's hand, shaking it firmly. Of course. Ashbourne's charm had already taken effect. Even in its suppressed state, mortals found it nearly impossible to resist his words. Hell, given enough time, he probably wouldn't have needed the vision at all. Chapter 49 AN. Yes, the MC has cosmic awareness, but it doesn't mean he would know of every small thing like what a person is feeling, or what is on the internet. Think of cosmic awareness as the Google of the gods. Zhu that some gods can search for anything and get the answer to anything they want, while others can only search for stuff and get the answer to huge things that can't be hidden. "What's with the sudden, out of the blue call?" Flash asked as he arrived at the Hall of Justice, the last to show up. For the fastest man alive, it was almost embarrassing that even Batman had beaten him there. "The world's presidents have come together to push someone as the leader of the Justice League," Hal explained, his frown deepening. "We can't fight it. If we do, they'll threaten to strip us of our right to be heroes." They had been busy searching for Ashbourne, but now they had to deal with this nonsense. "What?" Flash's eyes widened in shock. The news was way too sudden and out of nowhere. His gaze immediately shifted to Martian Manhunter, suspecting mind control. But Jean shook his head. He had already checked, and found nothing. "We're not seriously going to accept this, right?" Flash asked, looking around at the others. The Justice League currently operated under a council of 7 leaders: Batman, Flash, Superman, Wonder Woman, Hal, Aquaman, and Martian Manhunter. Each of them held equal standing in decisions regarding the League. And now, someone was trying to change that. Wonder Woman was a leader because she served as the bridge between Themyscira and the rest of the world. Aquaman, as the king of Atlantis, was the connection between the surface and the ocean's vast civilizations. Batman, Flash, Superman, and Martian Manhunter were keystones of the Justice League. Their presence and leadership formed the foundation of everything the League stood for. Hal, as a Green Lantern, was their link to the greater universe, balancing duties far beyond Earth's borders. And now, someone wanted to walk in, push them all aside, and take control. Just who had the world's leaders deemed worthy of wielding that much power? The 7 leaders of the Justice League stepped into the Hall of Justice, making their way to a secure meeting room. Inside, a wall of screens lit up, displaying the faces of world leaders from across the globe, all waiting for them. To their shock, even figures who had once rejected the League's involvement, like Queen Bee, who had outright banned them from her territory, were present. And she wasn't alone. African corrupt leaders, as well as some of the most powerful figures from the world's corrupt leaders, were also tuned in. This wasn't just a political meeting. This was something far bigger. To say everyone was shocked would be an understatement. Even Batman, the master of control, let his surprise slip for a brief moment before his expression hardened once more. Since everyone is here, I believe we should get to business. And just like that, the meeting began. The 7 leaders quickly found themselves completely suppressed, unable to push back with any countermeasures. Sure, they could refuse. But the choice was clear: either accept the decision, or the Justice League would be taken by force. They could walk away. They could leave the Justice League. But if they did, all superhero activity would come to an end. That included them using their powers as well. Who do you want to be the new leader? Batman, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. His name is Ashbourne, Queen Bee said, her tone light as if the decision had already been set in stone. He spent the entire night traveling the world, speaking to all of us, and he convinced every one of us. I'm sure he'll show you exactly why we accepted, so we won't waste time explaining it. Her mind, however, seemed elsewhere, drifting toward thoughts of someone. The Justice League stood frozen, too shocked for words. They exchanged glances, each searching for some kind of explanation, but none of them had one. And just like that, the meeting ended. They left the room, their faces marked with something they hadn't felt in a long time. A deep, unsettling uncertainty. Someone's in the watchtower. It's Ashbourne. Cyborg's voice came through their earpieces. Without hesitation, they moved. In seconds, they reached the teleporter in the Hall of Justice, and in a flash of light, they appeared in the watchtower. There, they found Ashbourne casually walking around, scanning the place as if it already belonged to him. What are you planning? Batman, without a hint of hesitation, strode straight toward Ashbourne. Ashbourne stopped, meeting his gaze, but said nothing. Instead, he raised a hand. And in an instant, they were thrown into the vision of a possible future. When it ended, and reality settled back around them, Ashbourne finally spoke. My arrival in this omniverse disrupted the balance between darkness and light, Ashbourne said. He let the words sink in before continuing. The best way to explain it: think of it like this. Imagine the author of a story suddenly got distracted while writing. The story kept going, alive, but without the main characters having their usual plot armor. Batman's eyes narrowed. I accept that this is my fault, Ashbourne admitted. So, I intend to fix it. I'll lend a hand, to help you all grow stronger, so that one day, you can face the darkness. He glanced around at them. And to do that, I figured becoming the leader of the Justice League would be the best approach. He paused, then tilted his head slightly. Any questions? How do you plan to lead the Justice League? Superman asked, his frown deepening. You 7 can continue running things as you have been, Ashbourne said casually. I'll step in when I see fit. He folded his arms. But you need to understand something. There's no plot armor anymore. That means, sooner or later, you're going to have to make the hard call, taking a life. His gaze swept over them. The darkness is already moving to swallow the light. And what better way to do that than by pushing you cowards into it? He raised an eyebrow. They fell silent. They hadn't considered that. You're all weaker than the average soldier down on Earth, Ashbourne said, his tone almost bored. I wonder how many lives will be lost because you refuse to take one. He let the words hang in the air before shrugging. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Just expect things to get worse. Villains will be sharper and stronger. Expect your loved ones to be killed. Expect your so-called heroic ideals to be tested. His gaze swept over them. The rest of the multiverse is going through the same thing, but worse. Because I'm not there. He tapped his temple. But I am here, and I'm sure they can hold out until we get to them. He clasped his hands together. Any more questions? Batman's eyes narrowed. If this is a plan to push us into killing, Ashbourne sighed hearing his words, he couldn't help it and rolled his eyes. Do I look that bored? Ashbourne scoffed. Secondly, I've been given full authority by the world leaders to kill whenever I see fit. And I could extend that authority to all of you, but only when I see that you can handle the weight of taking a life. He suddenly snapped his fingers. Wait. Never mind. I'll just give it to Wonder Woman. His smirk widened. She's got the balls to kill and still stay true to her beliefs. Unlike the rest of you. His faint, mocking laugh made their irritation spike. It's funny, really. The only woman here, and she's got more balls than any of you. Their expressions darkened. How couldn't they when Ashbourne was mocking them with something so serious as taking a life? Those who never took a life didn't understand just how easy it was to take a life. The first time it would weigh heavily on you, but the second time, it would lighten. The more one killed, the lighter that weight would become until one finds that killing was the answer to everything. People look down upon them for not killing, but have those who look down upon them ever taken a life? Chapter 50. Is what you said true? Superman finally asked, his voice tense. Without a word, Ashbourne reached into his shadow and pulled out a sleek black card. A license to kill, valid anywhere on Earth. And yes, he had it made last night, personally signed by every world leader. Seeing the card, Superman fell silent. He had always stopped others, and himself, from killing for one simple reason. It wasn't his call to make. Superman didn't interfere when governments sentenced criminals to death. He didn't challenge the system. His role was to enforce the law, even when he knew deep down that the people making those laws weren't always right. After a long pause, he spoke, his voice softer. Everyone is capable of changing. You know that. Ashbourne met his gaze and gave a small nod. Indeed. Ashbourne said. But twist metal too much, and it's bound to break. He met Superman's gaze. Sometimes, what we see is the best we're ever going to get. Sure, there are villains, here on Earth and out there, who might change for the better one day. But many, they never will. His eyes flicked toward Batman. Take the Joker, for example. In my opinion, the only thing Joker truly fears is Batman disappearing. Meaning, the only thing keeping him the way he is Batman himself. Ashbourne crossed his arms. So, if you really want to save him, then Batman needs to disappear. Let an Iron Bat or something take his place. Batman's eyes narrowed. What are you saying? Die before Joker, Ashbourne said coldly. And the next time he's about to blow something up, don't show up. In fact, no one should. You're the reason that guy exists. His glare bore down on Batman. Every life the Joker takes from this point on, I'm putting them on your head. His voice didn't rise, but the weight behind his words pressed down on the room. You could have stopped that mad clown a long time ago. Even crippling him would have made him harmless. But for some reason, you're harsher on struggling minions, people forced into crime just to survive, than you are on him. Silence. No one said a word, for they had never thought they would see the day where Batman would be put in such a position. I'll be watching you, Ashbourne continued. 3 more strikes and you can forget about suiting up again. He took a step closer, his gaze unyielding. The fact that you cripple people forced into crime while letting the Joker run free makes me wonder about you. So here's some advice. Get therapy. Before I force you to. He tilted his head slightly. And you should know about my bag by now. I could pull out something that would make you spill your entire heart to a therapist. So do it on your own free will, or I will make sure you get the help you need. Then, his eyes shifted to the rest of them. Hal, Ashbourne said, turning to the Green Lantern. I'll deal with the blue aliens later. For now, I want to get everyone ready to be equipped with a lantern ring, one that suits their abilities. Then, his eyes flicked back to Batman. And one more thing. Conquer that fear. His voice was firm but not unkind. Fear itself isn't evil. It all depends on who is using it. With that, he turned to leave. Well, I'm out. Got a list to make. He took a step but then paused, glancing back at Batman. My money. And the keys to my new home. Batman silently handed him a card and a key, the latter attached to a small piece of paper with his new address written on it. Ashbourne took them, gave a nod, and walked away. Ashbourne said nothing else. His shadow twisted, forming a dark portal before him, and he stepped through. A moment later, he emerged before a secluded mansion, far from civilization. A long, winding road stretched through dense forest, climbing up a hill to reach the grand three-story estate. Why is Gotham always so damn dark? Ember muttered as she flew out of Ashbourne's shadow, eyeing the mansion. Ashbourne barely glanced at her before handing her a card. Here. Go buy whatever you need. I need to check what my shadows dumped into my inventory. Ember took the card, staring at it with a strange look. What exactly would she, the Phoenix Force, possibly need to buy? Ember simply slipped the card away, saying nothing as Ashbourne stepped forward and pushed open the door. As soon as he did, shadow soldiers rose silently from his own shadow, spreading out and vanishing into the dark corners of the mansion, and the nearby land, blending seamlessly with the surrounding shadows. Stepping inside, Ashbourne took in his new home. Dust coated nearly every surface, spiderwebs stretched across the high ceilings, and the air carried the scent of time long forgotten. Old furniture, belonging to whoever had once lived here, filled the space, each piece covered with white cloths, adding to the abandoned atmosphere. I want to throw everything out and start from scratch, Ember said. Ashbourne nodded in agreement. Until he realized Ember's definition of throwing everything out was very different from his own. She held out her palm, and the furniture began to warp and reshape itself. Ashbourne sighed. That's not throwing things out, that's recycling. Ember simply shrugged, clearly unbothered. By the time she was finished, the entire interior of the mansion had transformed. The walls and furniture radiated a deep, burning red, glowing like embers whenever the sunlight hit them. Ember turned to Ashbourne expectantly. What do you think? Ashbourne, looking vaguely sick, stared at the overwhelming sea of red. This place looks disgusting. With those blunt words, Ashbourne activated Shadow Monarch Force, and in an instant, the mansion's interior shifted, transforming into something far grander. Something that looked almost like a castle. From the outside, this place already had a castle vibe, Ashbourne said, stepping back to admire his work. So, I figured if people step inside, they should be greeted with something worthy of a royal castle. Ember glanced around, taking in the transformation. The ground was now covered with a luxurious red and gold carpet, intricate phoenix patterns woven throughout. Above them, ornate chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm golden glow that made the entire space feel rich and refined. Exotic plants lined the halls, releasing a unique fragrance that filled the air, subtly relaxing the body and lifting the spirit. It was amazing. She opened her mouth to say as much, then stopped herself as Ashbourne spoke first. I'm thinking of calling this place Grand Castle, Ashbourne said with a smile. Grand because, well, it looks grand. And castle because, it's a castle. What do you think? Ember stared at him with a blank expression. You don't like it. Ashbourne frowned. Maybe it needs more edge. How about Shadow Monarch Castle? No. Wait, Shadow Life Giver Manor. Or maybe just Ashbourne Home. He kept rattling off more names, each one more ridiculous than the last. Ember's eye twitched. Just stop it, she said, cutting him off. Before he could go any further. Abyss Manor. No. This place doesn't really have a dark theme. Ember said, her eyes scanning the place while thinking of a good name. Something like Fireheart Manor or Phoenix Manor would fit better, given all the phoenix symbols you put here. Ashbourne frowned, glancing at the intricate phoenix patterns woven into the decor. After a moment, he gave a reluctant nod. Yeah, that makes sense. Phoenix Manor it is, then. With that settled, he began walking around the place, casually pulling various items out of his shadow, and placing them where they belonged.
Another tale fades into the silence. But here, in the fantasy audiobook library, stories never sleep. Subscribe, and return when your heart seeks adventure. We'll be waiting.